Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes the legendary Shinigami part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A small boy crawled under a bridge and hugged his knees. Silent tears flowed down his cheeks as he heard people passing over the bridge. They were the reason he was out, crying and hiding while fearing for his life. He was only 8. Who ever heard of an 8-year-old running for his life? It's insane. He hated his life. He hated everything about himself and everything he stood for. He wanted to stop being a burden to everyone and just be useful to someone, anyone. He sniffed loudly and then regretted, for he heard the footsteps on the bridge stop suddenly. He's under the bridge. Naruto, finding it pointless to keep hiding, ran out from under the bridge and continued to run for his life. Get him! Tears flew off his face, and he tripped over his poorly tied shoelaces. Time seemed to slow down for Naruto, as he looked back during his mid-fall and saw all the villagers behind him smirk evilly. He closed his eyes and waited for the pain and probable death. However, he never felt his body hit the ground because he felt someone grab onto him instead. When he opened his eyes, he saw that he is flying in midair, passing by many trees, and was being held by what he thinks is an ANBU. Naruto says nothing as he lets the ANBU take him to where he wanted. It's not like he cared anyways. A few minutes later, Naruto started to feel tired and he fell asleep, though not before hearing a faint chuckle. Naruto woke up with a fright. He had a nightmare again, the same one as before. The one where he foresaw his death, and the worst part is, if his dream was actually a prediction, his death would start here. Naruto tried to stand but felt his wrists and ankles tied down. His eyes widened as he looked around and saw he was in an old, abandoned laboratory. He almost threw up when he saw many eyeballs floating in test tubes and other body parts floating in a container of some kind. There was blood smeared on the walls in the room that were poorly lit by old light bulbs. This was it. This was where he saw his death, and this was where it going to start. Well, not if he had anything to say about it. Naruto struggled against the belts tying him down, but it proved fruitless. More tears fell and his fury was only fueled by it. He was always crying and he was getting sick of it. Calm down, boy. Naruto's body remained still and tense as he heard a croaky voice order. He looked in the direction of where he heard the voice and saw the same ANBU who helped him walking towards him. When appeared in the dim light, he removed his mask and smiled at Naruto. He shivered as he saw the ANBU's snake-like eyes observing him and his long, snake tongue licking his lips. Whoever this man was, he was not going to help Naruto, that was for sure. Who are you? Naruto stuttered. The ANBU moved his long, black hair from his face as he made his way towards the eyes in the test tubes. He took 2 of them, and then walked to Naruto. Who I am is not important, but what's going to happen now is. The ANBU taunted as Naruto felt his blood run cold. Now, hold still. The ANBU touched Naruto's forehead, and before he could protest, Naruto felt like going to sleep again. His eyes slowly closed, and his world started to fade. Sleep well, my future vessel, for when you wake up again, everything for you will change, was the last thing Naruto heard. As for the ANBU, he didn't know how right he was. A month later, Naruto roared loudly as many of the villagers ran from him. He felt great, so justified, and anyone who got in his way was immediately brought down by a simple cut of their throat. Even the ANBU, who were the supposed best in their field, were quickly brought to their knees and beheaded. Naruto felt the adrenaline pumping through his veins as another batch of villagers were killed. He looked down at his bloody claws and smiled evilly, baring his fangs. The feel of someone else's blood on his hands felt enticing and invigorating. The 2 tomo in his red eyes spun as he caught movement from the corner of his eye. He turned and easily impaled the Chunin that tried to behead him. Naruto pulled his right hands from the Chunin's body with his heart in his hands before squishing it. Kukukuku, that was so great. Naruto purred as he tossed aside the remains of the Chunin's heart. He looked to the west and saw that the sun was starting to set. He smirked, his work only half done. His highly sensitive nose picked up the scent of a familiar man, and he prepared himself. In a flash of smoke, an old man in white and red robes appeared before Naruto with 2 other ANBU. Naruto didn't let the 2 ANBU attack as he appeared before the one of the left, and pierced his throat with his left claw. The old man in the white and red robes and the other ANBU jumped away from Naruto, as he completely beheaded the ANBU and burned his body with a strange blue fire that appeared from his hands. Naruto, why? The old man asked in a regretful tone. Naruto flinched as he opened and closed his fist. Stay away, old man. Naruto shouted as he extended his arm out, and the blue fire was shot off his hand. The old man and his ANBU jumped out of the way, and the ANBU looked at the old man, and he nodded hesitantly. With a quick procession of hand signs, the sounds of 1,000 birds chirping could be heard around the area. Naruto watched as the ANBU with lightning in his hands crouched down before running to him. Opening his red eyes wide, Naruto was able to barely dodge the lightning jab and kick the ANBU in the abdomen. The lightning disappeared as the ANBU doubled over, and before Naruto could finish him off, the ground under him shot up and enveloped him in a coffin of dirt and stones. Only Naruto's head was visible from the coffin as he roared angrily and tried to free himself. "It's over," said a voice a few feet away as it was replaced with the sounds of chirping birds again. Naruto tensed and felt his blood rushing out of his mouth as the ANBU's lightning-covered hand appeared from his body and through the dirt. The dirt and stones then gave away and the ANBU freed his hand from Naruto's body, making it fall to the ground with a dull thud. Hiruzen, who had activated the Earth Jutsu, watched in sadness and confusion as Naruto's red fox-like eyes dulled and soon closed. Kakashi, who was less than eager to kill the boy, held his midsection as he walked to Hiruzen's side. "It had to be done, Hokage-sama. If we didn't stop him, he probably would have destroyed the entire village," Kakashi assured, and Hiruzen nodded absent-mindedly. "I know." Hiruzen stared at Naruto's prone body with sadness until it started to convulse violently. Hiruzen was about to act when Naruto's mouth suddenly opened and a white blob with a black mop of hair came out of him. Hiruzen and Kakashi watched in horror as what they thought was a blob was actually Orochimaru, who stretched out his limbs and then smirked at the two shocked Konoha shinobi. "That's a shame. He was such an obedient vessel. If it wasn't for the damned fox, I probably would have kept him, but unfortunately it was a one-time ride." Hiruzen's face, once gentle and shining with experience and understanding, was now contorted to one of pain, anger, and hatred. "I see you have some fixing up to do here, so I'll just be on my way." "You're not going anywhere," Hiruzen shouted as he forcefully threw shuriken at Orochimaru and made some hand signs. Ninja art, Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Thousands of shuriken appeared from that one shuriken, and Orochimaru chuckled as he was pierced by the shuriken. Then he dissolved into mud and disappeared from sight. "Hokage-sama, please calm down," Kakashi said as he held Hiruzen back from going after Orochimaru. "There is a time and place for everything, and right now, Konoha needs you to help with its recovery." And Kakashi looked at Naruto's corpse and saw his demonic features start to be replaced by his normal ones. "Yeah, I know. We still need to prepare for his funeral." Hiruzen walked to Naruto's corpse and started to cradle him. His surrogate grandson, bloodied and dead in his arms. How many times has he seen this before? Someone close to him dead in his arms, and he was powerless to save him. Why was fate so cruel? A tear was shed from his eye, and Kakashi placed a hand on his shoulder. They were surrounded by the bleak aura of a sunset as Hiruzen noticed there was no one in sight. Obviously, Orochimaru had planned to wreak havoc with Naruto's body, to further drive his reputation to the ground, but more importantly, to mess with Hiruzen. However, Hiruzen found himself fortunate that they caught Naruto earlier out here in the outskirts of Konoha before he reached the center where there were more civilians. Even with that luck though, it was completely overshadowed by the death of his grandson. "We need to go now, Hokage-sama." Hiruzen nodded as he stood and walked to his office with Kakashi and Naruto. He knew some people would have made it out alive to tell the tale of the rampaging Jinchuriki. Rumors, that's all it'll take for Naruto to have a lonely funeral. Naruto felt himself regaining consciousness as he let out a loud yawn. He sat up from the hard ground and immediately scratched his back, but froze when he heard the unmistakable jingle of chains. He looked down and saw a long chain attached to his chest. His reaction was immediate. He started to panic as he also realized that he was a bit transparent. He still had his white shirt and orange pants, but they were torn and ragged. "What's going on?" he shouted to no one in particular. He looked around and saw the usual civilians walking around, doing their errands as the sun shined down from the center of the sky. Naruto wondered why no one had kicked him out of the way yet like they usually did. Naruto stood from the ground and noticed that no one was making eye contact with him. It was almost like he wasn't even there. Usually, they'd at least glare at him or something like that, something that'd acknowledge his existence, but now, he was being ignored, which is something he didn't like one bit. "Hey!" Naruto shouted, but still no one looked at him. He appeared in front of someone who was about to pass him, and before he could say anything, the person walked through Naruto. He stared into space with wide eyes as his mind registered what he thought was impossible unless, that's it. He was dead, and now his spirit was going to wander the land until something happened. He wasn't so sure, but that was the only thing that made sense. He inspected his transparent arms for a little while longer before falling to his knees. He didn't even remember how he died, he only remembered being knocked out by the ANBU and then nothing. Tears shed as he finally felt the impact of the news hit him. Now that he was dead, he couldn't become Hokage. He couldn't be the best shinobi in existence. He would never find out how exactly Sakura felt about him. He suddenly had an idea as he turned to one of the stores with a public clock and saw that it was a little bit after noon. He smirked as he jumped to his feet, wiped his tears and ran to the academy. They should be taking a lunch break and he'll be able to see Sakura again. "I'm coming, Sakura-chan!" Naruto shouted as he ran through the crowd with relative ease. He was still getting used to not really having a physical body, but whenever he passed through someone, he chuckled goofily. After finally making it to the academy, Naruto ran to back where he knew Sakura would be with Ino, and smiled widely when he saw the mess of pink hair. He ran to her, and as he heard her talking with Ino, his running turned into slow-pace walk. "I can't believe he's gone," he heard Ino say, and he guessed they were talking about him. "I didn't know him that well or at all, but still," she said solemnly. "Yeah, he might have been annoying, but to just die. That's crazy," Sakura added, and Ino nodded her head. Naruto felt himself crying again, glad that Sakura cared for him. "I hate to say it, but I'm kind of glad he's gone." Then Naruto's heart broke. "What?" Ino asked, incredulous. "Come on, Ino, he's always trying to get me to like him and getting in Sasuke-kun's way. Now, he'll be at peace and won't bother anyone," Sakura said in her defense. Ino shook her head. "That's cold, Sakura," she stated, and Sakura looked down. "I know, but that's how I feel." Naruto clenched his fist tightly by his side as tears continued to fall, but for a different reason. "So I was only an annoyance? Is that it, Sakura-chan?" Naruto yelled in Sakura's face, but since he was dead, she didn't hear him. "No, you don't deserve to be called that, Sakura. You were never really my friend." He then turned to walk away and only took a few steps before a sudden feeling of being followed washed over him. He stopped and turned to see that there was a girl behind him who had also stopped. She had long black hair braided into one strand that ran down her back. Her outfit consisted of a short black kimono with a white underkimono under it. The sleeves of her kimono were not wide most kimonos, and the upper parts of the sleeves are puffed. Also, she wore a traditional wide white obi with a red cord fastening it. On her left sleeve was an armband with the word Lieutenant on it. In addition, she had white gloves that cover only the back of her hands and wrists, as well as a dark red choker around her neck. Her emerald eyes seemed to stare into Naruto's, and Naruto thought she could see him, but then thought otherwise since he knew he was dead. "Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, correct?" the girl suddenly asked, and Naruto flinched. He looked around and then pointed at himself while blinking. "And me?" The girl didn't even blink as she slightly tilted her head to the side. "You are Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, no?" she asked, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know about the Namikaze part, but I am Naruto Uzumaki." The girl's eyes narrowed slightly. "It's just as Captain Commander had thought, he doesn't know about his father," she thought as she bowed. "Rest assured, Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, you are a Namikaze," she said, and Naruto's sweat dropped. Thanks." The girl stood up again and nodded. "So you know my name, what's yours?" Naruto asked. "I am Ninyu Kuratsuchi, Lieutenant of the 12th Division in the Godai 13 and Vice President of Shinigami Research and Development Institute." Ninyu introduced herself, and Naruto blinked absent-mindedly. "Lieutenant 12th Division Godai 13 Vice President Shinigami?" Naruto shouted in shock, and Ninyu nodded her head. "That is correct," she said, and Naruto looked at her with blank eyes before he shut his eyes and turned around. Ninyu raised an eyebrow and followed after Naruto. After walking for 2 blocks, Naruto stopped again and turned. "Why are you following me?" Naruto asked. "I was ordered to bring you to the Soul Society, Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki," Ninyu told him, and Naruto blinked. "Okay, first, just Naruto Uzumaki at most. I don't know where you got the Namikaze part, but I'm no Namikaze," Naruto said, and Ninyu nodded. "Second, I think you're crazy. Shinigami are a lot scarier than you are, and I'm sure there's no society where all of you, if you are one, go," and Naruto closed his eyes to think. "Just no, I don't believe you. So leave me alone," Naruto said in a frustrated tone before walking away. Ninyu followed after him, but Naruto refused to acknowledge her again. He was dead and would now be a wandering spirit for who knows how long. He had better things to worry about than a crazy lady talking nonsense while following him. "Excuse me?" Naruto was surprised to hear Ninyu talk but didn't stop. If anything, he sped up. "Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto started to sprint down the sidewalk before taking a sharp right into an empty alleyway. Ninyu saw him enter the alleyway, and when she turned as well, she didn't see him anywhere. She squinted her eyes as if it'd help her better to see into the dark alley. She finally walked into the alley and searched to the sides of the giant dumpster. She opened it to see if he jumped in it, but nothing was in there, not even a bag. After a few minutes of no success, Nimue stepped out of the alley and continued down the street. Naruto chuckled silently as he stepped out from under the dumpster. I still got it, he said, and went in the opposite direction as Nimue. Turning once more, he shouted in surprise when he saw Nimue standing in front of him with an expectant look. He looked behind him and then back at her. How'd you do that? Naruto asked, and Nimue sighed. That's not important, Naruto Uzumaki. Please, I need to take you to the Soul Society. She insisted, and Naruto hummed to himself as he thought it over. Fine, but can I have one last look around here? He asked, and Nimue nodded her head. Naruto smiled and walked away with a wave of his hand. Thanks. Naruto had been wandering Konoha for what seemed like hours. He wasn't sure where he was heading and he didn't care. He was just too engrossed with his thoughts to care. Once or twice he had stopped by the Hokage's office and spotted Hiruzen working on paperwork, but Naruto could see the sadness in his eyes. Naruto was glad at least one person mourned his death. With a last, unheard goodbye, Naruto continued down the path, observing everything for the last time. One thing he noticed while on his tour was that everything seemed clearer. He saw things in a better perspective, and even the fast-moving things that moved didn't seem so fast anymore. This excited him a little. He guessed this was a perk of being dead. However, he wasn't so sure, but he felt like he was being followed again. Not by the girl. Apparently, she had respected him with some space and trusting him to go with her to wherever she wanted. No, this entity of sorts that's been following him was surrounded by a bad aura that gave Naruto the creeps. The malintent that this entity surrounded him with was almost unbearable for him, but luckily, it went away. Deciding to find out about it later, Naruto continued on his oblivious trek around Konoha for the last time. He was surprised when he found himself standing inside some garden. It was a beautiful garden full of different plants, flowers, trees, etc. He looked around some more and saw a pond only a few meters away from him. Beyond that was a huge house, almost like a compound or something. Naruto walked to the pond and looked into it, watching koi fish swimming freely in their limited space. The pond seemed to place him in a trance-like state because he didn't hear the sound of a door sliding open. Walking to her backyard, Hinata wiped the tears from her eyes as she failed to keep them from falling. She had heard Ino tell Sakura a rumor of Naruto dying of a heart attack. She doubted it, but he had been gone for an entire month, and she started to lose some hope. When the academy ended, she ran through the crowds and hallways and stopped in her room. She cried for about 2 hours before she decided to head to her family's garden in the backyard to clear her mind. She remembered the times when her mother brought her there to clear her mind, and it always worked, so why not now? She stopped in front of the pond and sat down on a large boulder placed right outside the pond. She looked into the pond, admiring the koi fish's beauty and agility in the water and letting her tears hit the pond, creating ripples. Naruto was brought out of his thoughts when he noticed the ripples in the water. He looked up and across the pond. He saw Hinata crying softly while staring into the pond. Naruto was surprised to find himself in the Hyuga's garden, and even more to see Hinata crying. Hinata was such a nice girl. She never made fun of anyone and was especially kind to him, which he didn't receive much from anyone. Sure, she'd blush and stutter when he was around and would occasionally faint, but that didn't make her a bad person. She was a kind-hearted soul. Even Naruto knew that much, and seeing someone as nice as her cry was a crime. It made Naruto kind of angry that someone made her cry, and then it just didn't sit well with him to do nothing but watch her cry. Why? And Naruto-kun? Naruto was shocked. Was he the reason why she was crying? Why did you die? I didn't even tell you. Naruto moved closer to the crying Hinata as his curiosity got the better of him again. Tell me what? What is it, Hinata? He asked, wishing she could hear him, though he guessed she wouldn't have heard him even if he wasn't dead, too engrossed in her own sulking to notice the world around her. Hinata sniffed as she held herself, feeling a little cold all of a sudden. So you don't know? Naruto turned and his eyes became as wide as saucers. Who are you? And what don't I know? He asked. Me? I am Hikari Hyuga, Hinata's mother. Hikari said, and Naruto noticed that she too was transparent. But wait, why? I died while giving birth to Hinata's younger sister, Hanabi. Hikari answered, and Naruto became quiet. I am sorry, I didn't know. He stuttered, and Hikari giggled, making Naruto think she was an angel. Her voice was soft and harmonic, while her laugh and giggle was angelic, sweet music to his ears. Besides that, she looked like an older version of Hinata, except Hikari was wearing a white kimono, and if Hinata was going to look like her mother when she grew up, Then Naruto knew she'd be beautiful. The only thing that took away her angelic look was the super long chain attached to her ample chest, but Naruto, being the young kid he is, didn't get perverted thoughts from them. It's okay, no one really did, at least, no one outside the clan. Hikari looked away with her eyes stopping on Hinata. Naruto followed her gaze and stopped on Hinata as well. You know, Naruto started, getting Hikari's attention. She really is a great person. I think she is one of the few people who didn't hate me, Naruto said somberly, and Hikari moved her gaze to him. Naruto looked back at her and saw sympathy in her eyes. It was then that Hikari finally realized slit pupil and red color in his eyes. Who exactly are you? You remind me of an old friend, but I can't put my finger on it, Hikari said, and Naruto looked at her oddly. My name is Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto answered, and Hikari's eyes glowed with interest. Uzumaki? She asked, and Naruto nodded happily. She had a calculating look as she had her gaze on him, making Naruto feel uneasy. Suddenly, she smiled and closed her eyes. I approve. Naruto raised an eyebrow and titled his head comically to the side. Hikari giggled again and shook her head. You'll find out what I mean later. Hikari looked back at Hinata. Naruto looked at Hikari for a long time before remembering what Hikari said before. Hey, what did you mean by I don't know? Naruto asked, and Hikari smiled. I don't think I should tell you. Naruto heard the teasing tone but couldn't help but fall for it. No, please tell me. Naruto knew he was getting a bit desperate, but he never liked being out of the loop. Hikari giggled and motioned him to come closer. Naruto listened and moved closer. He blushed when he felt her breath on his ear. Nope, she whispered, and Naruto's face expressed his disappointment. Hikari giggled a bit more at seeing his expression. I'm sorry, but I feel like I'd betray her if I told you. It's not as easy to talk about as whether. I understand, Naruto said, his tone revealing his disappointment. They both fell silent as Hikari turned his sights to her eldest daughter before returning it to Naruto. I'm sorry you had such a horrible life, she said, and Naruto felt like crying. Hikari seemed to have sensed it because she then started to hum softly after wrapping Naruto into a hug. It's okay to cry, Naruto-kun. And as if on her command, Naruto started to cry. He cried for a good 5 minutes before he calmed down. I am sorry. Naruto apologized, a bit embarrassed for crying, but Hikari smiled. It's okay, it's always good to let it out once in a while. It was then they noticed that Hinata wasn't around. She must have gone inside. Can you tell me more about Hinata? Naruto asked, surprising Hikari by his sudden question. Noticing the look she was giving him, Naruto decided to explain himself. I said before that she was one of the few who never treated me badly, and I don't think it's fair that I leave on a bad note, so to speak, he said, and Hikari smiled with a nod. Naruto listened to Hikari tell him about Hinata, the life she had before Hikari's death, and how her life changed after it, the horrible way her father treats her, and how she was always looked down on by the Hyuga clan. There were certain parts in Hikari's recount of Hinata's life that made Naruto kind of mad. Hikari noticed that he wouldn't look at her at some of the bad parts, and would occasionally clench his fist at the even worse parts. However, there were many good parts that made Naruto smile and even laugh. Hikari joined him in the laughter, and their laughs echoed through the vastness of the garden. She truly is a great daughter, and even if it was short, I'm happy I was able to be in her life. She has a pure heart, and sees things that no one, not even the Hyuga's Byakugan, could see. Naruto smirked at this. Are you saying that she has some special superhuman power? Naruto asked, and Hikari giggled. Sort of, she said, and Naruto's eyes sparkled with anticipation and excitement. She can see the good in people. She sees glimpses of light even in absolute darkness. I thought you were going to say that she could see into the future or something, but I guess seeing the good in people is good too. Hikari laughed, prompting Naruto to laugh as well. Their laughter soon died down, and it became quiet. She was really affected by your death, Hikari finally said, and Naruto nodded his head hesitantly. I guess so, but it wasn't as bad as yours. Hikari nodded her head in agreement. Guess we're both pretty important to her, huh? He asked, and she nodded again. I wonder why, he mused to himself. Hikari just stared at him with a smile. It's not that hard to see why you are, she commented, and Naruto looked at her curiously. It's not? She shook her head. You're very energetic and have a positive outlook on life. You never let anything hold you down for too long. You're not afraid to stand up for what you believe in, and you stand up for those in need, she stated. You're well-mannered, you have a good heart, and you always listen to it. In my opinion, these are the qualities of a great man, even if he's still a boy. She finished and Naruto blushed and looked away. How do you know so much about me? Naruto asked. Let's just say a little birdie told me. Naruto stared at her strangely and Hikari laughed. It's okay, someday you'll know what I'm talking about. Naruto nodded and after hesitating, he stood. I think I should go now, someone is looking for me. Naruto said and Hikari bowed, her smile never leaving her lips. Then I bid you a fond farewell Naruto-kun, and I hope I can see you again someday. Hikari said and Naruto nodded and bowed. Thank you and same to you, he said happily before walking out of the compound. After taking a couple of steps out of the compound, he looked back and through one of the windows, saw Hinata looking at the sky. Naruto looked at the sky as well and noticed that it was now night. Man, how time flies. He looked back at Hinata and noticed for the first time how pretty she was. He turned around and started to wander again for a couple of minutes before. Are you ready to go? Nimue asked, and Naruto shook his head. He looked back at Hinata's room and smiled. I have one more thing to do. Do you mind? Naruto asked, and Nimue thought it over. Please hurry, she said, and Naruto nodded with his wide smile. Hinata rested on her left side, facing the wall as she lay on her bed. She tried to sleep off her sadness, but so far, it wasn't working. She walked around her room, kept herself busy by reading some books her mother left her before her death, and even tried some light exercise, but nothing worked. She had given up, and now she just waited for sleep to claim her and let her enjoy the happy world her mind created for her in her dreams. She just hoped tonight's dream was better than yesterday's dream. It wasn't like she expected much, and now she could only pray for a better dream. Pulling the covers over her head, Hinata tried harder to go to sleep as Naruto jumped into her room. He landed on his feet and was glad that Hinata decided to open the window. From his place, Naruto watched Hinata moan as she shifted her feet next to each other and got herself more comfortable in her place. He checked the time on her alarm clock right on her nightstand and saw that it was just a little past midnight. He had seen her do some exercise in her room earlier and quite frankly, his impression of her being a weird girl was still strong. Still, he didn't think it was a bad thing. Weird was as good, normal is just blah. Still, he waited a few minutes after she jumped into bed before entering her room. He assumed that she fell asleep and now he could talk to her. He wasn't so sure why he waited for her to go to sleep when she couldn't see him, let alone hear him, now that he was dead. Maybe he was afraid even though he was dead, she'd be able to hear him and even see him. As impossible as that was, he didn't want to take the risk. Now, with her back turned to him, he felt even more confident to speak. Naruto did a quick search around the room and found a stool near the edge of her bed where her head was. He walked toward it and sat down. He cleared his throat as he tried to think of something to say. He knew he wasn't obligated to say anything, but he felt like it would be the right thing to do. Getting over the awkward feeling in his stomach, he opened his mouth. Hey there, Hinata. Unknown to Naruto, Hinata's eyes sprang open at hearing the familiar voice say her name. However, she was frozen by fear, the fear of turning around and not seeing her crush. She didn't want to get disappointed, so she ignored it, telling herself to just forget she even thought she heard his voice. After a moment of stillness and silence, Hinata knew she was hearing things. I'm not sure what I should say, Naruto said with an uncomfortable chuckle. I guess I should start by saying that my first impression of you was that you were a shy, weird and dark girl. Now I don't think you're dark. You're still shy, there's no doubt about that, and you're still a little weird, but that's good, I like weird. Hinata's heartbeat escalated at this, and she felt like it would soon jump out of her chest and hug Naruto behind her. She had no doubt in her mind anymore that Naruto was in the same room as her. But I learned some things today, and I can say that you're an awesome, good-hearted, shy girl who is just like me, and for that, I just want to say that I'm sorry. He thought he heard her gasp, but he ignored for the time being. I'm sorry I didn't try to get to know you. I'm sorry that I was so wrapped up in my dumb crush on Sakura that I didn't even stop to look around. If I did, I'm sure I would have noticed you a lot sooner than I did. Naruto took in a deep breath. Maybe we could have been friends, good ones, he added with a smile. I talked to your mom, Hinata, Naruto mentioned. She's an awesome lady. I can see why her death affected you so much. Naruto paused as he thought of more things to say. She also told me about you, so much about you. Naruto smiled goofily. She even told me about the time jumped off your seat when she told you that you were getting a younger sister, and even danced around. He chuckled mirthlessly, unaware of the tears Hinata silently cried, before he stopped and frowned. It's not fair, is it? He asked rhetorically. She was such a great lady, and what happened to her just wasn't fair. It wasn't her time, and yet it isn't fair. Naruto said as he held his head in his hands while his elbows rested on his knees. No, it wasn't. Naruto looked up in surprise to see Hinata sitting up on her bed and looking straight into his eyes. He quickly wiped away a few stray tears and blinked at her. Hinata noticed that his once beautiful cerulean eyes were now a deep, crimson color with black, slit pupils. Why, you see me? He asked and she nodded. I can hear you too, she added, and Naruto wiped his eyes with his hands and looked at her with an intense stare. Hinata broke eye contact when she became uncomfortable under his stare. Naruto's eyes then widened when he realized that she had heard everything he said after entering her room. Well, this is awkward, Naruto said, and Hinata slowly nodded her head, her eyes still refusing to meet his eyes again. She rubbed her left arm with her right hand and Naruto stared at his feet. Finally, Naruto asked the question that had been on his mind for the last couple of minutes. How's life going? Naruto asked with his goofy smile. Hinata looked at him strangely before sighing. The same except for your death. Hinata added the last part with a bit of uncertainty. I see, he said, and it became quiet between the two again. Why? He asked. Why what? She countered. Why do you care about me so much that you would cry over me when we weren't even good friends? Naruto elaborated, and Hinata let her bangs cover her eyes as she tilted her head forward. Because Hinata couldn't help but press the tip of her index fingers against each other. You were a good person, someone I could look up to, Hinata said, and Naruto nodded his head slowly. Cool. Hinata looked at him with confusion, and saw him smiling happily. She looked away sadly as she slowly gathered her courage to ask him a question. And Naruto, she heard him hum, letting her know he was listening. Did you mean what you said earlier? About being sorry that you didn't get a chance to actually know me? She asked, and Naruto's smile disappeared and was replaced by a contemplative look. Yeah, I did, he answered. Biting her bottom lip lightly, she dared to ask more questions. And why you said you talked to my mom? Naruto nodded his head. Yeah. Hinata looked at Naruto, and Naruto saw the tears in her eyes. I miss her, she said. Naruto was surprised by the lack of stutter or hesitation in her voice, but it was replaced by the bigger shock of Hinata jumping into his arms and crying into his shoulder. I miss her so much, he heard her muffled voice say. He was surprised that she was not only able to see and hear him but also touch her. Was he going crazy? It's okay, Hinata, Naruto stuttered out as he clumsily patted her shoulder, not used to someone hugging him, at least, not a girl his age. He felt her grip on his tighten, and he could feel his shoulder getting wet. She clung to him like a lifeline as tears fell down from her eyes like water in a waterfall. After composing himself, Naruto hugged Hinata back. He closed his eyes and allowed only 1 or 2 tears to escape their imprisonment. He felt the world around him disappearing. It was like only he and Hinata existed. No amount of outside interference could take this away from him as his hug constricted a little. It'll be okay, Hinata. Everything will be alright, he whispered, and felt Hinata shake in his arms. He didn't know it, but his words sent chill up and down her spine, and for the first time since her mother died, Hinata felt safe and assured. After a few minutes of crying and holding him, Hinata broke the hug and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I am sorry. Naruto smiled as he remembered what Hinata's mother has told him when he said that. It's okay, Hinata, and it's always okay to let it out once in a while, he said, and Hinata looked at him so much admiration that Hinata wasn't sure if she was the only one who could hear her heartbeat. She smiled as she hugged Naruto one more time. Naruto smiled as well as he held Hinata again, this one a little shorter than the last one. I'm sorry, Hinata, but I should be going now, he said, and sadness overcame Hinata's beautiful lavender eyes. Why, you can't go? Hinata shouted, once again surprising Naruto. I can't? Hinata shook her head vigorously with her eyes closed. I need you, she added. I'm sorry, don't say that, she interrupted, and Naruto stared at her with somewhat widened eyes. So what exactly do you want me to say? He asked, and Hinata gulped down the hesitation in her throat that kept her from speaking her thoughts. Say you won't go. That'll you'll be here, become my friend. Hinata hugged him again with her eyes closed and tears streaming down. Anything but you're sorry. Naruto took in a deep breath. I don't want to lose another person, not someone who means a lot to me, she said through her tears. I'm sorry, Naruto said, and Hinata's hands clenched his shirt. Please don't go, she said in a hushed tone, and Naruto closed his eyes. His heart struggled to stay intact as he held the crying girl in his arms. His friend needed him, but apparently, someone else needed him too. His heart came to the conclusion that he should stay with Hinata, to help his friend cope with his death, but his mind also concluded that he had no choice in the matter. Inevitably, he would leave and there wasn't a damn thing he or anyone else could do about it, and both his mind and heart knew it. Hinata. His voice was like the night air, calm, cool and smooth. Hinata looked up and met his eyes. I can't stay, I have to go. Without her usual shyness or hesitation, she shoved her head in his chest. But I promise I'll be back, Naruto said, making Hinata look back up after a while of no response. Why you will? She asked with some disbelief, and Naruto smiled a cheeky smile with his eyes closed and a thumb pointing to himself. Believe it, was his reply, and Hinata couldn't help but smile. No number of words, no matter how poetic or complex they may be, could be able to make her feel more assured than those 2 words uttered by the one she admired the most. She hugged him again, with a smile plastered on her lips. They stayed the way they were for what seemed like hours. The reality of the matter is that they only hugged for 2 minutes. Still, no movements or sounds were made except for the sound of 2 hearts beating in sync. I'll be back, okay? Hinata nodded her head and Naruto stood. Promise no matter how long it takes for me to come back, you'll wait for me? Naruto asked, and Hinata blushed at his intense stare and question. I will, she said, and he smiled. Good. He walked to the window, and then turned to give him the best genuine smile he could muster. I'll see you later then, Hinata-chan, he said before jumping out the window. Hinata lay back down on her bed with a smile and slept the rest of the night without the smile wavering. Landing gracefully on the ground, Naruto walked up to Ninyu and nodded his head. I'm good, was his only comment, and Ninyu nodded. A butterfly as black as the night sky deprived of the moon and stars landed on Ninyu's shoulder, and Naruto eyed it oddly. Cool, indeed, she said, and suddenly, a sliding door appeared from thin air. Whoa! He yelled in surprise. The door then opened and through instinct, she walked into the light, her silhouette disappearing after a few steps in. Naruto cautiously walked up to the door and eyed its entire structure. Before crossing the threshold, he stopped and stuck his left hand inside. So I just walk in, or he paused to see if he'd get a response. All he got was a hand grabbing onto his wrist and pulling him in. He righted himself before he fell and adjusted his shirt. I could walk by myself, thank you, he said before taking in his new surroundings. He was in an office of sorts, that much he knew. It was very spacious and clean with white walls and a huge door on his right. The room was so big that it made his entire apartment room look like a broom closet. Ahem. Naruto looked up and saw an old man with a long, white, plaited beard sitting on a chair. He was bald with a giant X scar on his skull, and he had a tranquil look as he studied Naruto, or at least Naruto thought he was. Next to him was a fancy-looking man with a katana tied to his obi. Slamming his staff down, the old man stood and walked towards Naruto. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, I presume? Naruto shifted uncomfortably under the old man's powerful gaze. Kind of. Who are you, old man? Naruto asked, and the man who looked like the old man's assistant scowled. Such insolence. There, Sasuke, he is only a child, the old man said, and Naruto tilted his head to the side. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, from now on, you will address me as Captain Commander Yamamoto. Any less and you will be punished, understood? Naruto looked at Yamamoto seriously. Sure thing, all I mean, Captain Commander Yamamoto, sir. Naruto teased, adding a hand salute with a goofy smile. Naruto couldn't register the look on Yamamoto's face since it always looked like he was thinking. He just hoped he didn't piss the man off. I see you've made it here in one piece. Naruto absent-mindedly rubbed the back of his head. I guess so, Naruto said with a goofy chuckle. A thought then popped into Naruto's mind. Now that I think about it, what am I doing here? Naruto asked, and Yamamoto walked back to his chair. You, Naruto, are a very special human. You hard endured through many hardships at such a young age and have experienced a premature death. Naruto's eyes dulled at being reminded of his death. However, you also have the strongest of 9 Bijas sealed in you. Well, actually, you did. Now it's basically part of your soul. What? Naruto shouted, but was silenced when Yamamoto slammed his cane against the ground multiple times. When Yamamoto was sure Naruto wasn't going to talk out again, he sighed. As I was saying, your spirit is now merged with the Kyuubi thanks to the one known as Orochimaru. He messed with the seal and tried some experiments on you, which is why you now possess the Eye of the Fox. Naruto's eyes widened. I do? Naruto asked, and Yamamoto nodded. I guess that'd explain why everything seems 10 times clearer. Naruto mumbled to himself. And even when you were still alive, I knew you had an enormous amount of spiritual pressure, not unlike some of our captains here in the Soul Society. Naruto registered this statement, and wondered how good that was. Of course, being the same level of a captain is good no matter what the subject is, but still, curiosity reared its ugly head. But he refrained from asking that question and decided to ask the one that's been on his mind since he entered this strange, new world. So you want me to become a death god, a Shinigami? Naruto asked skeptically, and Yamamoto nodded his head. That sounds awesome, Naruto said, and Yamamoto nodded his head passively. I suppose, for lack of a better term, it is. However, you must first go to the Spiritual Arts Academy and understand the basics of being one of my Shinigami. Naruto smiled and gave another hand salute. You can count on me, Captain Commander Yamamoto. Oh, and Naruto paused, a bit hesitant to continue. What is it, boy? Yamamoto asked. Can I occasionally visit my old world? At least once a month or something? Naruto asked, and Yamamoto looked at him curiously. Such a curious question. Why do you ask? Yamamoto asked, and Naruto looked at the floor. I promised a friend I'd see her again someday. He answered, and Yamamoto nodded. I'll grant you the opportunity to return to your home once you are a legitimate Shinigami, and when I think you are ready to go back to your home, agreed? Naruto nodded eagerly and bowed deeply. Now that that's taken care of, Nimue, please show Naruto where he'll be sleeping. Nimue nodded and ushered Naruto out of the room. Before stepping through the door, Naruto looked back at Yamamoto. Thank you, Captain Commander Yamamoto. He bowed and then left the room, off to start his new life as a Shinigami. Captain, I do not doubt the decision you've made, as I know you have your reasons, but why did you agree to let him return home after becoming a Shinigami? Sasuke asked, and Yamamoto slumped in his chair. I see great things in that boy. He has the same look, the same drive that his father had. He will lead us into a greater era and be a great asset to us in the near future. Yamamoto answered, and Sasuke knew that he wasn't going to get a straight answer from the old man. Yamamoto was glad his lieutenant dropped the subject. Naruto walked into the barrack of some division. He wasn't sure, Nimue told him, but his amazement in the small tour through Siriidii had overshadowed Nimue's voice. This place is awesome. Naruto shouted in delight, and Nimue nodded her head. It is a nice place to live in, she commented, and Naruto cocked an eyebrow up at her enthusiasm or lack thereof. He decided not to say anything as to avoid getting into an argument. He put his hands behind his head and followed after Nimue as she led him through the barrack. There were men all over the place, sleeping, eating, fighting, or laying around doing nothing. They all wore the same thing: a white shitage, a black kosode, a black hakama, a white hakamahimo, white tabi, and waraji, the shihakusho or uniform of the Shinigami. Naruto was wearing essentially the same things, except he was wearing a blue shitage. The strips on his kosode were blue hakama, and there is a circular symbol on both breasts of the outer shirt. What are we doing here? Naruto asked in a whiny tone, and Nimue looked back for a second before having it face forward again. To assign you to a room to live in, she answered solemnly, and Naruto nodded slowly. Ah, fresh meat. Naruto tensed as he heard this and looked to his right to see a crowd of men in the shihakusho staring at him, many either cracking their neck or their knuckles, or even both at the same time. Naruto gulped and ignored them as he hoped that his room had a lock. After a few minutes, Nimue stopped in front of a pair of giant doors. She stepped up to the door, but before she could knock, the door opened quickly and Nimue and Naruto blinked as they a small girl with cotton candy-colored hair in the shihakusho, staring up at them. Hello, Nimue. Nimue's stoic mask was cracked as she let loose a small smile. Good afternoon, Yuichiro-chan. She greeted back, and Yuichiro smiled and then looked at Naruto with a curious look. Who are you? She asked, and Naruto coughed into his hands and smiled. This is Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, Nimue said, and Naruto glared at her. Why do you keep saying that? Naruto asked in calm frustration. They heard a grunt come from the room behind Yuichiro, and Naruto flinched. A smile as bright as fireworks appeared on Yuichiro's face. Namikaze and Uzumaki? Yuichiro asked in excitement that seemed to want to burst out of her small body. Naruto nodded slowly, and Yuichiro grabbed his hand and dragged him into the room. Nimue silently followed after them and closed the door behind her. Yuichiro was saying some things to Naruto, but Naruto couldn't hear them because of the speed of her words and because of the rush of wind passing by his ears. The speed she was going in seemed unreal to Naruto. She then suddenly stopped, and the momentum caused Naruto to slide forward on his stomach and stop just short in front of a giant of a man sitting with a bowl of sake in his left hand. Hey Kenny, guess what? Yuichiro yelled, and Kenpachi stared coldly at Naruto, who felt like the man was staring straight into his soul. Then Naruto laughed at such a thought when he remembered he was already a soul so everyone could see it. He looked back up after his small laugh and saw that Kenpachi was not amused. Who the hell is this? He asked. Naruto decided to get up, and afterward, he saw Kenpachi stand as well. Kenpachi stood tall and muscular at 6 feet 7 inches or so with sleeveless captain's haori that had a ragged look to it. His long black hair was spiked up and for some odd reason, had a bell attached to each spike, a total of 12 bells. An almost stranger thing was the eye patch on his right eye that had a gold outline to it. He's a Namikaze, she said happily, and internally, Kenpachi was amazed but he refused to show it. And an Uzumaki. At this, his eyes widened and he couldn't prevent the smile that appeared on his once solemn lips. Uzumaki, eh? The sudden interest his voice scared Naruto. Just who the hell were his parents? Why, yeah. Naruto stuttered out, and Kenpachi chuckled lowly. And a Namikaze. Quite the kid this brat is, Kenpachi stated, and Naruto glared at him. I'm no brat, he said, and Kenpachi's smile was replaced with a frown as he released his spiritual pressure. Naruto's eyes widened as he fell to his hands and knees. He was sweating bullets as his arms and legs strained to keep him up. Air seemed reluctant to enter his lungs as Naruto gasped for a breath. I am Kenpachi Zaraki, captain of the 11th Division. If I say you are a brat, then that's what you are. You got that? His voice left no room for argument, and even nodding left Naruto panting even more. I want to hear you say it, Kenpachi demanded, and Naruto struggled to raise his head. I see can't, he said, and Kenpachi smiled deviously. What? He asked as he placed a hand behind his left ear. Naruto bared his teeth as he tried to stand. He was able to slowly make it to his feet, and after a minute or two, he had his equilibrium. He raised his body after 2 attempts and then turned his head upward. The entire process was beginning to tax on Naruto's body, but he refused to fall again. His crimson fox eyes stared into Kenpachi's jade eyes with conviction and determination. SSCRSC screw you, Naruto said. The statement surprised everyone in the room, but no one had a frown on their face. Nimi watched in somewhat amusement alongside Yuichiro, who was smiling goofily, and even Kenpachi was smiling. He applied even more of his spiritual pressure on Naruto, and Naruto's pose faltered only for him to stand up straight again in a few minutes. A dim, yellow glow appeared to surround Naruto's red eyes, and Kenpachi's smile became even more sinister. Yes, that look in your eyes. I remember it now. Naruto could barely understand Kenpachi as he was fading in and out of consciousness. Kenpachi looked at Nimue. And he's never been under the influence of spiritual pressure? He asked, and Nimue shook her head. He came from the human world, so I assume he hasn't. His eyes stayed on her before returning to Naruto, who was starting swaying side to side. Impressive. He released his spiritual pressure, and Naruto fell forward, caught by Kenpachi before being pushed back and falling on his butt. Naruto shook his head as he gathered his bearings. His vision was blurred and he rubbed his eyes with his hands, hoping to return it to its better-than-average perspective. So, what are you doing here, Kuratsuchi? Kenpachi asked as he sat back down, taking a sip of his sake. She bowed as she began to speak. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki is a new Shinigami, and Captain Commander Yamamoto has suggested this division as his new home. Kenpachi blinked and raised an invisible eyebrow. What makes the old man think he's fit to join my division? Kenpachi asked, and Ninya looked at Naruto. Captain Commander Yamamoto informed me to tell you to ask Naruto. Kenpachi snarled as he saw Naruto just now regain conscious thought. Hey kid, what the hell makes you think you're qualified to join my division? Naruto stared blankly at him before he reached into his pocket and took out a folded sheet of paper. He showed it to Kenpachi, who snatched it and skimmed over it. Where'd you get this? He asked, and Naruto shrugged. On the paper were a total of 8 questions, 4 asked to Kenpachi and another 4 to Yuichiro. An illustration of Kenpachi was on the back of the paper, and the front read, Kenpachi Zaraki. 1. What kind of individuals are you seeking? Guys who like fighting. 2. How would you describe the atmosphere around your division? We get along and have fun. 3. What do you require of new recruits? They should be strong. 4. Some words for the Shinigami recruits. Strong guys, come and try me. Yuichiro Kusajishi. 1. What kind of individuals are you seeking? Strong guys. 2. How would you describe the atmosphere around your division? Everyone gets along. 3. What do you require of new recruits? No weak people should join. 4. Some words for the Shinigami recruits. I'll think up a nickname for you. Next to the both first and third questions was a check that Naruto obviously made, and in the top right corner was a crudely drawn picture of a bowl with chopsticks sticking into it and what looked like steam coming out of it. Crumpling up the paper, Kenpachi lazily tossed it aside and stood, towering over Naruto like a castle to an ant. That tells me nothing. So kid, What makes you think you're good enough to get in my division? Naruto stood and gulped down his fear. I like to fight and eventually I'll be strong, Naruto answered and Kenpachi chuckled. Eventually? I need strong guys now. Kenpachi retorted and Naruto glared. Well, I'm not strong now, but give me a year and I'd be able to give you a run for your money. Naruto challenged and a spark of mischievous appeared in Kenpachi's visible eye. A year, you say? That almost sounds like a challenge. He taunted, followed by a light shove, but for Naruto, he had to prepare himself for it, and even then he was almost sent through the doors behind him. It is, Naruto said, and Kenpachi's chuckle turned into laughter. So how about we make this challenge a little more interesting? If you can give me a run for my money, then I'll allow you to join my division. Kenpachi bent forward and met Naruto eye to eye as he said his next words. But if you can't even put a scratch on me or make me sweat, then you'll relinquish your Shinigami powers to me and become my personal slave. Naruto took a step back and his body shook. After some hesitation and gathering the conviction he needed, Naruto stood up straight. A scratch I win, no scratch I lose? Naruto simplified and Kenpachi nodded his head, his sinister smile still on his lips. Deal. Kenpachi grabbed Naruto's hand and shook it violently. As fun as this was, Naruto still needs a room to sleep in, Nimue said, and Kenpachi looked at her before returning his gaze at Naruto. He can sleep here if he wants, I don't care, Kenpachi said offhandedly. Naruto stared in awe at the giant man before looking at Yuichiro and Nimue. Very well, thank you, Nimue said, and Kenpachi scoffed. Come Naruto, we have one more thing to do before you are allowed to rest. Naruto blinked and nodded, too tired to argue. As Nimue led him out, Yuichiro watched him leave. He's going to make an interesting member, Yuichiro commented to herself, only to turn when Kenpachi laughed. Are you saying that he's going to hurt me? Kenpachi inquired, and Yuichiro giggled with her eyes closed. Of course not, she answered without hesitation. Then what are you saying? That I know you, was all she said before screeching in joy. I sense Nana. Yuichiro burst through the doors and Kenpachi heard her say, Nana! Where's my candy? He smirked at his surrogate daughter's actions before muttering a single word. Namikaze. Naruto's body twitched with a sense of foreboding as he sat in his seat. His eyes also twitched at every one movement as he waited for Nimue to come get him. It was just a couple of minutes ago that he was in the barracks of the 11th Division, and now he was in hell. Naruto? Naruto jumped off his seat and fell on his face when Nimue called his name. He shook as he stood and slowly followed after Nimue deeper into the building and out of the waiting room. He saw test tubes, beacons, instruments of torture and many other things that outright scared Naruto as he voyaged through the laboratory. Nimue! Where the hell is my experiment? A voice yelled, scaring Naruto even more. The voice was rough and dry, as if the man only knew how to yell. Nimue led Naruto through one more door before bowing in front of an odd-looking man. His appearance had a very skeletal look to it with a skull-like visage. His face was painted entirely white with the inner portion of his face painted black with the exception of his nose. His eyes were a golden color, and had his teeth bared, giving the appearance of him constantly smiling. Both his ears were seemingly replaced with stubbed golden cones. His fingernails were blue and, with the exception of the fingernail on his right middle finger, were all short. The one long fingernail was as long as the finger itself. He also wore a white hat with two ends that point to his right, and a large purple scarf around his neck. His whole body, even his face and hands, had been painted black and white. He's right here, father, Nimue stated, and Naruto looked at her, and then at the man. Father? Ignoring Naruto's comment, Mayuri walked up to Naruto and Nimue. He then shoved Nimue aside. You're blocking my light, Nimue. Be of some use and get me my needle. Naruto's hands became tense at his side at the thought of another madman running some tests on him. He took a step back, but soon, his back hit the wall behind him. Calm down, child, I'm only messing with you. I'm not going to be running those kinds of tests, Mayuri said as he walked away from Naruto, letting Naruto release the breath he didn't know he was holding. This won't take long. Mayuri grabbed a pen-looking thing from a table near him and moved in front of Naruto. He moved the pen-like thing in front of Naruto's left eye and pressed his thumb against the back tip of it, turning on a light. Naruto flinched at the sudden light in his eye. Do not close your eye. If you do, you'll only make this last longer than it has to, Mayuri advised harshly as Naruto decided to follow the man's suggestion. After a few seconds of humming to himself, Mayuri moved the light to Naruto's right eye and examined it as well. He clicked it off and pocketed the small pen light. Such poor craftsmanship. Who is the idiot who messed with your seal? Mayuri questioned. It was a man by the name of Orochimaru. Nimia answered. Mayuri stared at her with disgust. I was talking to him, you worthless fool. Nimia looked away and Naruto could feel his anger rise slightly. But as soon as Mayuri made eye contact again, his fear overshadowed his anger. Is this true? He asked, and Naruto shrugged. I don't know. You don't know? Mayuri echoed in a mocking tone. Stupid brat. You're as worthless as she is. He added, his eyes looking at Nimue. At any rate, his work is trash, at best. I, however, am a true genius when it comes to all things related to science. Mayuri boasted while grabbing Naruto by his collar. Follow me. Naruto let himself be dragged. His feet refused to obey his brain's orders anyways. He was hauled through multiple rooms before stopping in a room lit by a single fluorescent light in the middle of the room, shining down on a table. Naruto was knocked out and fell limp on Mayuri's hands. Nimue, come here and aid me in this surgery. I'm sure even you can help me with such a task, or am I wrong? He asked her, and Nimue kept her head bowed. No, father, you are most correct. Mayuri smiled as he tossed Naruto onto the table. Then let's begin. His menacing smile widened. Naruto awoke at the sound of his head pounding against his skull. He grabbed his head and groaned as he felt like his head had been used to play soccer for 3 hours or so. He slowly opened his eyes, the light stinging his eyes. When he composed himself, he noticed that the world around him was even clearer than it was before, and all his senses seemed sharper, as he noticed the smell of medicine was a lot more distinct. He looked around and saw that he was in a white room with a single bed, a nightstand next to the bed and a window. He also took note that he was out of his academy uniform given to him by Nimue before they arrived to Mayuri's barracks. Now he wore a light green hospital gown. Naruto slowly stood from the bed and staggered after taking a few steps. After making sure he wouldn't fall, he walked to the door but stopped before walking out of it when he saw a mirror on a nightstand that was oddly placed near the door. He picked it up and saw that nothing happened to him. His eyes were still blue and his 3 whisker marks were still where they've always been. After the short inspection, he walked out of the room. He looked to his left. The hallway was desolate with a numerous number of doors leading to who knows where, and it scared Naruto that he couldn't see the end of the hallway. He looked to his right. It was just as barren as the left side and with the same amount of doors and just as endless. It seemed to him that the hallway stretched all the way to infinity. However, one difference that caught Naruto's eye was a gray metallic door just a few feet away from him. He stepped through the threshold and into the hallway, feeling the fabric of the carpet under his feet. The door seemed thick and open from the middle. There were 2 buttons next to the door, one with the up arrow printed on it, and a second one under it with the down arrow. Naruto looked around once more and his body began to shake, not too sure if he was shaking because he was afraid of getting lost or because of his body's current state. He chose the less troublesome one and assumed it was whatever was wrong with his body. He heard a single light bell ring a few feet to his right and saw the gray metallic open from the middle, just like he thought. It opened to reveal Nimue, who had a tear running down the left side of her face. She looked up and was surprised to see Naruto standing in the middle of the hallway. She wiped her tear away and stepped out of the elevator. Why are you out of bed? She asked, but Naruto didn't respond to that question. Why were you crying? Nimue evaded her eyes for a second before steeling herself and re-establishing eye contact. You're mistaken, I was not crying, she insisted. Naruto was about to say something but Nimue beat him to it. You shouldn't be walking around. It is not wise to do so after coming out of an operation. Naruto's eyes widened. I was operated on, he asked, and Nimue nodded. So he knocked me out to operate on me? He repeated, and Nimue nodded again. Naruto felt an inner fear emerge from his stomach as memories of his death returned and replayed in his mind. His knees shook as he started to sway. Nimue grabbed his shoulder to steady him. Are you all right? She asked, and shaking away the images that plagued his mind, Naruto nodded. I know the thought scares you, but there is a positive outcome, she said, and Naruto stared at her with vacant eyes. Like what? He asked, his skin as pale as snow. As you've probably noticed, your eyesight is marginally better, as well as your other sense. Naruto contemplated this before nodding. There is more, but I think my father can elaborate it more efficiently. She told Naruto and signaled him to follow her. She led him to the elevator and pressed the down arrow. The doors closed and quiet ensued it. Naruto shifted in his place as he kept sneaking glances at Nimue. Nimue noticed but didn't say anything. Are you sure you're okay? I saw you crying, and Nimue shook her head. I'm fine, I was simply thinking to myself, she answered, a little too quickly for Naruto's liking. Well, if you're so sure, he said. I just want you to know that if you want to talk about it, you can come to me. Nimue looked skeptically at Naruto. I'm not here to judge, just listen. He offered and then let it drop. None of them said a word, even as the elevator stopped and opened to reveal Mayuri standing over a table with all his attention focused on whatever lay on the table. Father. Mayuri's shoulders tensed for a second before he looked back at Nimue, and then Naruto. So you're finally up at Brat? Naruto's hands were clenched tight at his sides as he cautiously entered Mayuri's laboratory. What did you do to me? Naruto asked with a strain. Mayuri, his attention completely on Naruto, turned his back on his work and leaned with his back on the table. A pop within a test tube next to Naruto resonated in the room and made Naruto jump. He glared at the test tube before fixing it on Mayuri. I fixed you, was Mayuri's answer, and Naruto looked at him skeptically. Nimue, didn't you explain him exactly what I did? Nimue looked down from her father's gaze. I thought you'd explain it better, father. Nimue answered, and Mayuri looked at her before he used Shunpa to appear next to Nimue and grab her neck. Naruto was surprised when his eyes took in every detail of Mayuri's movement from his previous spot to choking Nimue. You're worthless, Mayuri said, and Nimue couldn't look at him in the eyes. Yes, father, was her only reply. Naruto said that Mayuri's grip on Nimue's neck tightened and he clenched his hands into fists. Let her go, Naruto shouted, and Mayuri faced him, not releasing Nimue. What did you say to me, boy? He challenged. Naruto flinched from the glare Mayuri was giving him but didn't back down. I said let her go, Naruto repeated, and Mayuri smiled as he let Nimue go. She fell to her knees and held her neck in pain. Mayuri walked up to Naruto, easily 1 foot taller than Naruto. He looked down on Naruto with a smile that shook Naruto to his core. I am Mayuri Kuratsuchi, captain of the 12th Division, president of the Shinigami Research and Development Institute, and I am a genius without equal. What makes you, a lowly, amateur Shinigami, think you can tell me what I can and can't do? Mayuri asked. Naruto heard bubbles gurgling in the background, many lights casting shadows on Mayuri's face, making Naruto quiver with fear. Mayuri's smile became sinister as he pushed Naruto back. Naruto fell and backed away from Mayuri. This man reminded Naruto too much of the last ANBU. Speak up, boy, I can't hear you. Mayuri taunted, and Naruto gulped loudly. His eyes widened as his head started to ache. He grabbed his head, closed his eyes and curled up into a ball. Mayuri tilted his head in curiosity as he watched Naruto spaz out. Get away from me, Naruto said with a struggle, and Mayuri laughed again. He shook his head. Get away, Naruto shouted in a deeper, demonic voice, but Mayuri only irked him. Or what? He asked, and Naruto's eyes snapped open. Mayuri was surprised to see Naruto activate his eyes. A red sea surrounded his slit pupil while surrounded by a golden-orange glow. His body started to twitch as if he was being electrocuted as he stood. He then roared and swung his hands to the table nearest him. It fell to its side and destroyed all the test tubes on the table. What the dash? Mayuri was interrupted when Naruto punched him squarely on the chest. He flew through the room, crashing through multiple tables before being stopped by the wall at the end of the room. He looked up and saw Naruto continuing his rampage. Leave me alone, he shouted as he burst through the many other unbroken tables. Mayuri stood to stop Naruto, but before he could make a move, Naruto crashed through the window and ran away from Mayuri. That brat, Mayuri growled as he surveyed the damage Naruto did to his lab. He'll pay for this. Go after him, he ordered Nimue, and she nodded before disappearing. He growled after she left, and in his anger, he flipped over a table that was turned on its side. This is not good, Mayuri stated as he started to pace around the room. The little brat better hope he's not in immediate danger soon, or else it'll be the end of him. Naruto sat under a tree, still twitching but not as violently as he was when he was in Mayuri's lab. He didn't know why he freaked out in Mayuri's lab or why he did what he did, but he was glad he was away from him and the horrible place. During his freak out, Naruto did notice that his moves were more fluid and quick while his vision became better, and he took in every detail. He wasn't sure what Mayuri had done to him, but he was sort of glad he did what he did. He then heard rustling behind him, and he prayed that it wasn't Mayuri or Nimue coming to get him. He turned just in time to see a man with red hair pulled back into a ponytail jump out of the bushes. He wore a Shinigami's uniform. Who are you? Naruto asked, and the man looked up at him and blinked. Who am I? Who are you? The man retorted, and Naruto pouted. I asked you first? Naruto replied, and the man frowned before walking up to Naruto and picking him up by the back of his collar. Well, I'm asking you now, who are you? Naruto glared at the man. Naruto Uzumaki, The man blinked before looking up and thought, Uzumaki sounds familiar. The man said as he let Naruto go. He fell on his butt and let out a small cry of pain before rubbing his butt. Jerk. So who are you? Naruto asked, and the man looked down at him. My name is Rinji Abarai. Rinji answered. Now answer me this. What are you doing here? Rinji asked, and Naruto stood up. I'm just running away from some crazy guy. Naruto replied before walking away. He was stopped, however, when Rinji put his hand on his shoulder. Are you a Shinigami? He asked, his curiosity evident on his face. Naruto looked back at Rinji and nodded his head. Rinji just blinked deadpan. Aren't you a little too little? Naruto's eyes narrowed and he slapped Rinji's hand off his left shoulder. Rinji watched as Naruto walk off and smiled. Interesting kid. He commented before he walked off as well. What is wrong with people here? Naruto asked himself after a few minutes of silence and walking. All everyone ever does is either fight or act crazy. This is nuts, Naruto shouted in frustration. Hey kid! Naruto turned and faced a girl wearing a Shinigami's uniform. The girl had pale skin, violet-colored eyes, and black hair, with one strand of hair always hanging between her eyes. Have you seen a boy walking around here? He has red hair. She asked, and Naruto looked back from the direction he came from and then pointed in that direction. She looked up and then back at Naruto. Thanks. She ran off after ruffling Naruto's hair. Rinji! She yelled, and Naruto shook his head. Yep, everyone's crazy. He thought as he continued walking through forest. When he reached the borders of the forest, he saw that he ended up on some kind of hill. He walked forward, his head and eyes turning at every direction, taking in the scenery. The giant hill was connected to the Suriidii and seemed to stretch out about half a mile out, give or take. At the end were two white poles adjacent to each other, standing about 100 feet high. What the hell? Naruto uttered as he walked up to the two white poles. He touched it, and immediately retracted it. It felt powerful, like it had a mind of its own and could destroy him without a second thought. Of course, this was Naruto's impression. Obviously the poles had power, and could receive more of it, but an inanimate object such as the pole couldn't possibly have a mind, could it? Shaking his head and walking past the poles, he stepped over the edge and looked down, getting vertigo from just looking down. He felt himself lose his balance and lean forward. A pulse rippled through his body and his eyes widened as he fell forward. His body felt stiff as he felt a power inside him pulsate from his core. He could feel his hands clench slowly as he felt the pulse bring power with it as it washed over his body. What's happening to me? Naruto felt his world blacken as his body picked up speed. The only other thought that plagued his mind was as followed. I'm hungry. On top of an harbor, surrounded by weather not fit for fishing or relaxing, two figures sat facing each other, staring intently at each other and panting. Neither moved a muscle, either blinked nor looked away. Hours of struggling for dominance had drained them of most of their strength. The shorter of the two raised his head and his cerulean eyes locked onto the demonic crimson ones of his opponent. So, what exactly do you want? The taller of the two asked, and the shorter moved his legs to sit in the lotus position. I want to call a truce between us. The shorter proposed. A truce? Of what kind and for what purpose? The taller asked. The shorter scratched the back of its head. Just to work together, nothing complicated or false, honest. The reason behind it, well, just to help our host out. The taller one moved its head forward and showed its fangs in a smirk. A long snout let out a short burst of fire, showing more of its face to its adversary. Don't you mean our son? The Kyuubi asked, making the shorter flinch and causing the taller to laugh. No, he's my son and your jailer, that's it. The shorter corrected, but the Kyuubi only laughed harder. Even so, I still don't see what I get out of it. The Kyuubi said. We would get stronger and help us stay alive, or at least, continue to exist. Minato explained. The Kyuubi hummed to himself as Minato waited for him to reply. We don't have much time. Minato yelled. And if I say no? Kyuubi asked. Then we have a greater chance of losing to our foes, Minato answered somewhat calmly. Making you look weak for being in a weak host. Kyuubi snarled at the insinuation. Fine, but only because I do not want to look weak. Minato smiled and held his hand out. Truce? Kyuubi looked at his hand skeptically before holding out his paw and grabbing Minato's hand, shaking it. Truce. A bright light appeared from their hands and they disappeared only to be replaced by a tall figure. His shaggy, blonde hair with its tips tinted red was blocking a portion to his face as his black slitted blue eyes looked around. The man moved over to the water and saw his reflection. He smiled but couldn't see it since a mask blocked the lower part of his face. He looked down on his hands and saw his claws and noticed his change in attire. He was wearing a red shirt under a black trench coat with white flames laced to the bottom and black hakama pants with no shoes. Such power greater than I had first imagined, the man said as he clenched and unclenched his hands. His eyes flashed red for a moment before they returned to their lively blue shade. Naruto could feel himself coming back to the world of the waking, and he sat up just as soon as he remembered his predicament. He looked around and saw that he was in some giant cave. Sunlight seemed to come from nowhere and boulders and grass decorated the area. He stood and looked around, trying to see if anyone else was around. It made no sense. Last thing he remembered was him falling down, heading head first for the ground, but now he was in some gigantic cave with enough room for a small war to take place. He took a step forward but stopped in mid-step when he felt something under his foot. He moved his left foot and saw a dato. The blade was a pure silver with a black edge, a yellow whirlpool-like spiral as a guard, a black grip and a bright yellow pommel with a black spiked chain attached to the end of the pommel. Whoa! Naruto bent down and picked up the dato. He touched the chain and the grip before touching the blade itself. Naruto. Naruto looked around as he gripped the dato with both hands. Who's there? Naruto asked aloud, hoping to receive an answer. You don't see me? I'm disappointed. The voice seemed to taunt Naruto, making him angry. Show yourself. Naruto shouted and the voice only chuckled. Naruto's eyes widened when pressure was suddenly applied to his entire body, and he fell to his hands and knees. He gasped as air escaped his lungs in an attempt to run away from the harsh pressure. You have much to learn, the voice stated as Naruto struggled to stay on his hands and knees. After a few more minutes of being under the pressure, Naruto felt it leave and his body become light again. He stood up after composing himself and looked around. He had dropped the dato when the pressure suddenly came, and still remained on the floor. He looked down and picked it up again, but after some hesitation, he threw the sword away from him. The sword landed with its blade driven into the ground. Naruto's eyes widened when a pulse escaped the blade and used the ground as a medium to travel to Naruto. Naruto jumped to avoid the pulse, but even he knew he'd eventually have to come back down to the ground. As soon as he did, his world became fuzzy and he sat down, his legs spread out and his head leaning forward. He was fighting a losing battle as he struggled to stay conscious. He knew he lost the moment he saw the dato shaking, freed itself from the ground and the pommel head straight for his forehead. Naruto slowly opened his eyes when he felt something dripping on his forehead and a harsh wind blow over his body. After regaining his vision, he saw that he was looking up at a sky stained by the black clouds. What was dripping on his forehead were some rain drops let loose from their imprisonment. He sat up with caution, and when he was standing, his eyes widened. He stood on a harbor that seemed to have no end in one direction, while the other ended only a few feet in front of him. Surround him were violent waves and harsh winds. Thunder could be heard off in the distance, and near the horizons, whirlpools could be seen spinning rapidly. Where am I? He asked no one in particular. A flash of yellow came from behind Naruto, and when he turned, he saw a man standing behind him. Blonde, red-tipped hair, a black mask covering the lower half of his face, blue, pupil-slit eyes stared into Naruto's eyes. His black trench coat rustled wildly as another wind passed over them. Naruto could tell the man was smiling by the way his mask was shifted upwards slightly. Who are you? Simple question, at least it seemed so in Naruto's mind. Naruto saw movement under the man's mask but no sounds followed. What? The man seemed to repeat whatever he said before, but still nothing came out of his mouth. Naruto glared at the man and walked up to him. Towering over him, the man just watched as Naruto stared up at him and waited for the boy to do something. Why won't you tell me your name? Naruto asked, and the man shook his head. It doesn't work the way, it seems. The man said, and Naruto took a step back. That voice, it sounds familiar. Naruto whispered to himself. The man shook his head. I am here to help. The man said, and another gust of wind ran over the two, but only Naruto was affected by it. The man just let it try to take his trench coat, but it was futile. The coat wasn't going anywhere. Naruto, however, almost fell off the harbor. The man stretched out his hand and quickly held on to Naruto's collar. Naruto was surprised by the man's quickness, and watched as he pulled him back to the harbor and then let him go. How old are you? The man asked, and Naruto shook his head, shaking off the odd chill that traveled down his spine. 8. Naruto answered, and the man's eyes changed from indifference to sadness. You're so young. The man said solemnly, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. He looks just like me too. The man thought. Yeah, well, sorry if I don't meet your standards. Naruto said sarcastically, and the man shook his head. He has her attitude though. The man added to his thoughts. Naruto's eyes then widened as he took a step back. I remember now, you're that voice from earlier, Naruto said with an accusing finger pointed at the man. Without hesitation, the man nodded. Yes, I was. He answered, and Naruto relaxed but stared at the man oddly. So what did you mean I had much to learn? Naruto asked, and the man stared at Naruto some more before turning. The two remained silent as the sounds of the harsh weather abused their ears. Naruto watched the man before his attention turned to his environment. Why was the weather so bad? This isn't how it's supposed to be, the man finally said, and Naruto looked at him again. What isn't? Naruto asked, and the man faced him again. There shouldn't be any violent waves, any harsh winds or rapid whirlpools. No thunder up in the sky, there shouldn't be a cloud in the sky, at least not this much. The man stuck his right arm out, his palm facing Naruto as he waved it slightly. This is our fault. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Our? How do you know it's not your fault? Naruto asked, and the man's hand dropped back to his side. This is our fault. This is the result of our disharmony, the man said, and Naruto looked around. Don't you think that's a little exaggerated? The man shook his head. In this world, the balance between us is essential to our survival. Now I know you're exaggerating, Naruto said doubtfully. The man grabbed Naruto by his neck and lifted him off the harbor. He raised him up to his eyes and stared deeply into them. In this instance, I do not joke. If you want to be a Shinigami, then you will have to cooperate with me, the man said with conviction, earning a slow nod from Naruto, who was scared by the man's sudden action. I am the spirit of your Zanpakuto, the tool in which you use to battle your enemies, your comrade that never leaves you, the man said seriously, and it seemed that his words were starting to sink in. He extended his left arm out, and out of thin air, the dado from earlier appeared, and the man gripped it tightly. I am an extension of your soul. The man handed the dado to Naruto, who grabbed it, and held it tightly as another burst of wind passed over them. With some training in time, you'll come to understand your Zanpakuto, understand me, and use it to your full potential. The man let Naruto stand on his own 2 feet before kneeling in front of him. With my help, you and I can become stronger as long as we work together. The most important thing for a Shinigami and his Zanpakuto is teamwork. The man smiled with his eyes closed, and Naruto couldn't help but smile as well. If that's out of the way, we can begin your training. Naruto blinked as the man started walking down the harbor. Wait! Naruto yelled out, but before he could continue, he was sucked up by wind and thrown into the skies. The last thing he saw was the man look up at him with purple eyes. Naruto awoke with a jolt as he panted heavily and cold sweat ran down his face. The dream seemed so real, and now, looking down at the dado, he couldn't help but think it was. Are you ready to begin? The voice asked, and Naruto looked around before smiling and nodding. Yes. Naruto stood and gripped the dado with both hands. First, we're going to work on your stance. Shift your legs until they're shoulder length apart, with the right leg slightly forward and the left leg back. After doing as he was told, Naruto waited further instructions. Grip the hilt tightly and concentrate on your Zanpakuto. Once again following instructions, Naruto closed his eyes after gripping the dado tightly. His eyes snapped open when he heard the clinging or chains moving and something cold slither its way up his arms. He looked down and saw the spiked chains spinning around his arms and stopping at his shoulder. Whoa, awesome! Naruto commented. For the next year, I will teach you the proper stances, how to contact me whenever you need me, and any other basic thing you need to know, the man said inside Naruto's subconscious. Naruto nodded before thinking about something. Why for a year? And why only the basics? Naruto asked, and the man chuckled. Isn't that your deadline? The man asked, and Naruto nodded his head after thinking it over. And I'm only going to teach you the basics because you need to go to the Shinigami Academy even if you know your stuff. This way, you won't get too bored in class. Naruto nodded his head again. Everything you'll need for the next year is in here. North from here is a place where you can take shelter. Food and clothes are supplied, and there is a hot springs that I want you to go to after every training session. Naruto nodded his head, and without further questions, Naruto began to practice with his Zanpakuto's spirit teaching him from the inside of his head. Hinata awoke softly as the sun's rays passed through her closed curtains and hit her eyes. She fluttered them open and yawned in her open and waiting hand. She sat up on her bed, and her mind wandered to her dream from the previous night. She remembered it being so realistic, so unlike her usual dreams. Her dreams would pertain to dates with Naruto, but her latest dream seemed so real, so unlike her other ones. The Naruto in her dream last night acted like he usually did, happy-go-lucky instead of the romantic she would dream up. Her mood sobered when she remembered that Naruto was dead, and his funeral was in a week. She got off her bed, but before she could head to her bathroom, she heard the light thud of paper hitting the floor. She looked down and wondered what a folded paper was doing over her while she slept. She bent down, picked it up and unfolded it, reading aloud what was written inside. Don't forget about me. I promise you I'll be back, and I always come through with my promises. Naruto. Hinata felt all feeling in her hands go numb, and the paper slid off her hands and onto the floor again. She was speechless, almost thoughtless. The only thing she was actually doing was thinking about the letter over and over again. A smile adorned her face as she remembered the promise Naruto made. She knew he would find some way to come back to her. This was Naruto who made the promise. She knew better than to doubt his word. With this in mind, she convicted herself to fulfill her promise and wait for him to return. She ran into the bathroom and began her usual morning rituals, and after she was done, she ran down to the dining room where she was sure her father, sister, and cousin were waiting for her. She had always wondered why they would eat together. It's not like they cared at all if she was there. She guessed it was just the way the family's been run since ever. Good morning, father, Hanabi Niji. Hinata greeted with a shy smile and a bow. As she would expect, her father bowed back. Hanabi shrugged, and Hinata got her daily dose of Niji's cold stares and cold greeting. Good morning, Hinata-sama. Hinata's smile wavered as the coldness of his tone reached her ears. She sat in her place just as the other Hyuga branch members appeared from the kitchen and began to serve the family their breakfast. After they left, Hinata began to eat the food in front of her. Hinata wanted something more than her usual breakfast, which consisted of rice, seafood, and other fermented foods. Hinata looked up from her breakfast to her father, who had stopped eating, looking intently at her. After the academy, I want you to come directly home for some training. As the heiress, there are a few things that you are expected to know and do. Hayashi said in a no-nonsense tone. Hinata nodded as she swallowed the food in her mouth, but not before noticing Hanabi's body become stiff. Okay, father, she replied meekly. Hayashi nodded his head and continued eating. After they finished, they each went their separate ways except for Niji and Hinata, who both attended the academy. Hinata walked a few paces behind Niji, just like every morning, so she wouldn't be paranoid about whether or not he was glaring at her behind her back. Are you going to be attending the funeral of that loser? Niji asked with the same monotonous tone he spoke with when he didn't want to show his true feelings. Hinata looked at the back of Niji's head with a hurt look. And then Naruto-kun is not a loser, Hinata said, defending her crush. Niji just turned his head a little to look at her before returning his gaze to the sidewalk in front of him. You are right, Hinata-sama, he wasn't a loser. He was a failure and a mockery to the name shinobi. Niji corrected himself, causing more pain to Hinata's heart. She was sure that Naruto and Niji haven't met before, so how he could say such hurtful things was beyond her. Lucky for all of us, he was killed before he was able to embarrass the entire village. Hinata stopped walking as she hung her head, her short bangs covering her eyes and upper face. Niji, after 5 steps, noticed that Hinata stopped walking and turned to face her. He inwardly smiled, imagining the tears running down her cheeks and the sadness in her eyes. Before he could insult Naruto anymore, Hinata looked up at him. Her eyes hardened with disappointment, and what he guessed was disdain. You know nothing about him, cousin, so do not speak so ill of Naruto. Speaking about another like that is unbecoming of a Hyuga, Hinata said, conviction in her voice and showing none of her usual meekness. She walked past the shocked Niji and couldn't help but smile a little at seeing his reaction. For his part, Niji showed no more emotions after getting over his initial shock. However, on the inside, he was angry and about ready to strike anything, specifically Hinata. He glared holes at Hinata's head as she walked confidently in front of him. He would get her back for that comment. He was sure it would be a while before he would have his revenge, but patience was something he had. Oh, that day would come, he just knew it. Elsewhere, Hiruzen sighed as he entered his office. He was just coming back from his usual morning walks with his mind buzzing with the proposition given to him by Danzo, Hamura, and Koharu. He hated it, he refused it, but they were very adamant of it, and it seemed that they were not going to be satisfied with his no. He wouldn't be surprised if they went over his head and asked the daimyo. With an exasperated sigh, Hiruzen sat on his chair and closed his tired, old eyes. His mind wandered to the upcoming funeral and he couldn't help but let a few tears fall. It was his fault his surrogate grandson is dead. He knew it, and even tough Kakashi refrained from saying or showing it. He knew it as well. If he had taken better care of Naruto, he would still be alive, not dead. He was tempted to just quit and let a younger shinobi take his place. Maybe Kakashi would do it. From his track record, he was a great leader with a 90% success rate as an ANBU captain. Or maybe one of his old students would do it. Orochimaru was definitely out of the picture, considering he was responsible for Naruto's death, as well. Jiraiya is too much of a lecher to become Hokage, and Tsunade is a drunken gambler with the worst luck in the entire nation, possible in the entire world. Hiruzen hummed, though Tsunade did show great leadership during the Third Great Shinobi War. The only problem was actually getting her to come and stay long enough to hear his proposition. Hey old man. Hiruzen snapped his eyes open, surprised to see one of his old students in front of him. Jiraiya smirked as he sat lazily on the chair in front of Hiruzen's desk. You're losing you touch old man, you didn't even flinch when I snuck in. Jiraiya taunted but became serious when he saw Hiruzen give him a weak glare. What's wrong? You act as if someone died. Hiruzen's eyes became crescent-fallen as he looked away. Who died? Jiraiya asked seriously, almost fearful to hear who had died. Normally, Hiruzen would mope about one of his shinobi's death but not show it. Now, however, the frown on his face showed that this death was important, at least to him it is. Jiraiya, it was your god's son. Hiruzen stated emotionlessly, and Jiraiya's eyes widened. And Naruto's dead? He asked, his throat clenching up and his heart beating quickly. Hiruzen nodded and closed his eyes again. How Jiraiya's voice left him as he saw his old sensei take in a deep breath before letting it out through his nose. Orochimaru. Hiruzen answered with his tone full with venom and disdain. Jiraiya had a shocked expression before it turned to one of pure rage, but before he could rant, Hiruzen spoke up. He had somehow managed to take over Naruto's body and went on a rampage. He killed a good portion of the civilian population, and at least an eighth of the shinobi ranks. Hiruzen explained, only adding more fuel to Jiraiya's fire. Hiruzen watched as his student stood from his seat and walked to the open window behind him. The funeral's in a week, at least show up for that. Hiruzen said, and Jiraiya stopped before jumping out of the window, without another word. Hiruzen groaned as he closed his eyes again and leaned back in his chair. He was seriously getting too old for this. Naruto slowly let himself sink into the hot springs before his body completely entered the hot water. He let out a content sigh as the water swallowed his body whole with his head sticking out of the water. It felt like the water was washing away all the ache and cuts, similar to what it did to dirt. Closing his eyes and enjoying the feel of the water on his sore body, he thought about how his training was going so far. 6 days of hard training, and he could tell that he was slowly progressing. His stance was still a little sketchy, but nothing another few days couldn't take care of. Along with that, his Zanpakuto had been teaching him about patience and meditation. Naruto knew that was probably going to be one of the hardest things to master, but he was determined to become stronger. With his mind wandering, he thought on how Hinata was doing in Konoha since he left. The sky poured down heavily as only 5 people stared blankly at the picture placed in front of the closed casket. The water dripped down the black casket and the attendants, but they didn't care. The one in the casket had it much worse. Hiruzen wore his Hokage robes as he mourned the loss of his grandson. Jiraiya, who stood next to him, was also mourning, but the hate for his former teammate far overshadowed his grief. His face was contorted in pain and anger as his fist lay clenched by his side. He wiped what seemed to be tears from his eyes but could easily be mistaken for raindrops. To his right was Kakashi, looking down at his right hand with disgust. From under his mask, a scowl was laced in his lips, and he wished he could have thought of another way to stop Naruto without killing him. However, at the time, there was no time to think, just act. He clenched his fists tightly before loosening his grip and letting them fall to his sides. He looked up and stared at the picture of a happy Naruto, smiling fondly as he wished to have spent more time with him. Kakashi turned his head to look at the newest member to join Naruto's funeral. He was surprised and had no idea how Jiraiya had been able to convince Tsunade and her apprentice, Shizune, to come to the funeral, but he wasn't really complaining. Tsunade was feeling a lot of emotions, the main one being regret. She regretted the fact that she had left Naruto alone in Konoha. She was the one who told Kushina of her pregnancy and knew Kushina and Minato very well, so why shouldn't she have stayed to help take care of the brat? She sighed, she knew exactly why. After the death of Minato and Kushina, Tsunade wasn't sure she could handle being at their funerals, so she fled with Shizune, her dead lover's niece, and wandered the elemental nations. Tsunade. Tsunade looked at the one who spoke her name and replied, Thank you for coming. Hiruzen continued with an even tone. Tsunade furrowed her eyebrows in worry at seeing her sensei with a broken look. No problem, beside, I owe it to the brat anyway, she said as she wiped a single tear from her left eye. You know it was Naruto's dream to be Hokage. Tsunade looked at Hiruzen suspiciously. Wonder why he would bring up something like that. He reminds me a lot like your brother. Same looks, same dream, he continued, and Tsunade looked at Naruto's picture, seeing the resemblance. Hiruzen knew he had just played a dirty trick, but if his plan were to succeed, then he had to pull off all the stops. Since it doesn't appear that anyone else is coming, Hiruzen trailed off when he heard footsteps approaching. The 5 attending the funeral turned and were surprised to see a young girl with short, dark blue hair walk to them, wearing a light purple kimono, holding an umbrella with her left hand and 2 roses in the other, one white and the other red. Hello, am I late? She asked as she stopped in front of Hiruzen. Everyone smiled warmly and Hiruzen shook his head. No, you're not Hinata. Do you want to say goodbye? Hinata nodded her head and walked by the 5 adults to Naruto's casket. Hinata stopped in front of it, and placed her 2 roses by the other 5 red roses. She was curious as to why her father didn't simply attend to give his rose, but she guessed he was just too busy running the clan. She turned and looked at Hiruzen. Can I see him one more time? She asked and Hiruzen nodded again. Hinata faced the casket again, and opened it a little so the rain wouldn't get Naruto's corpse wet, but just enough for her to look at him. She saw his whiskered face and smiled affectionately, as she remembered seeing the same face smile all the time, even if half the time they were false. She closed the casket and walked away, heading for her home so she could continue with her training. She wasn't going to be weak anymore. She wasn't going to let anyone push her around anymore, and she definitely not going to let Naruto down. She will become stronger. So when Naruto came back to keep his promise, she could finally face him and tell him she liked him. Hiruzen watched as Hinata walked away, wondering what was going through the heiress's mind. Then he remembered something. Jiraiya, Tsunade, let's go to my office, there is something I wish to speak to the both of you about. Tsunade, Jiraiya and Shizen looked at him oddly but complied after they watched Naruto's casket be buried. Kakashi had a feeling he knew what was going to happen but didn't voice it. After they made it to Hiruzen's office, Kakashi left saying he needed some rest. Hiruzen dismissed him, and then placed a silencing jutsu in his office. His 3 visitors sat in front of his desk as he took his place in his chair. Oink. Tsunade, how have you been? Hiruzen asked, throwing everyone off guard. I'm fine? She answered hesitantly. Hiruzen smiled and nodded his head. That's good to hear, and you Shizen? Shizen jumped at the mention of her name as her pet pig, Taunton, winked again. Fine Hokage-sama. She stuttered out. Hiruzen nodded again and Jiraiya growled. Get to the point, old man. Jiraiya snapped, earning a glare from Tsunade. Alright Jiraiya, as you 3 know, I am old and there's no saying how much longer I'll hold out. He eyed the 3's reaction and wasn't surprised with Jiraiya's suspicious expression and Tsunade's and Shizen's puzzled ones. So with this in mind, I've decided to retire. Shocked expression replaced the 3's old one as their mouth hung a geki. What? Have you gone senile? Jiraiya shouted, but Hiruzen simply shook his head. So who are you appointing as your successor? Tsunade asked and Hiruzen stared at both Sanins. Said Sanins looked at each other before both shook their heads. Hell no, not going to happen. Both said simultaneously. Well, one of you has to do it. Kami knows I'm too old for this and I don't know of anyone else who can replace me. If either of you do, then Danzo would surely use this as an opportunity to take over, and who knows what'll happen to the village then. Jiraiya crossed his arms over his chest and pouted. Well, I have my spy network to think about, and even then, you know how horrible of a leader I am. Tsunade seems more qualified to take on the job. Tsunade glared at Jiraiya, but he ignored it. I need one of you 2 to take this job, and I'm going to need the decision now. Hiruzen stated with authority, and both Sanins had contemplated look. Fine, I'll take it. Shizen and Jiraiya looked at Tsunade, shocked as her declaration, but Hiruzen smiled. Thank you, Tsunade. Tsunade just shrugged it off. Shizen couldn't believe it. She had been out of Konoha for about 9 years and now she was returning and actually staying. Tsunade-sama, are you sure? She asked, and Tsunade took a while before nodding. Well, now, let's get started on the paperwork. Hiruzen smiled innocently as he started to search for his resignation and for the papers that made Tsunade the official Godame. He took out 2 piles of papers and Tsunade started to regret her decision, having the odd feeling that she would see much more piles of paper in her term as Godame. You're still a bit rough, but you've exceeded my expectations. The man's voice said, and Naruto smirked confidently. You think I could beat him? Naruto asked, and when his Zanpakuto didn't respond right away, a vein popped from his head. Jerk. The man laughed. Do what I've taught you over the last year, and you'll do fine. Naruto grunted with a nod. Don't want to keep him waiting. Kenpachi stood in the middle of a dojo, waiting for Naruto to arrive. He wasn't really sure if he'd show up at all, seeing as no one had seen him in the last year. He didn't care either way, he just wanted to eat and get this over with. Surrounding him was his entire division plus Nimue, who wanted to see if Naruto would show up as well. The division around them murmured in excitement, and in doubt before silence reigned over them when the entrance doors slowly opened. They creaked in protest as a hooded figure walked into the dojo slowly. Kenpachi's eyes opened a little before a sinister grin graced his lips. Nimue was surprised but adamant not to show it. Everyone was shocked as the figure walked up to the middle of the ring, in front of Kenpachi. The person wore a white trench coat with red flames laced on the bottom with a white hood over his head. The person slowly took off the hood and under it, yellow locks were seen. So you showed up, eh? Kenpachi asked, and Naruto nodded with a smile of his own. The wind whistled as everyone watched Naruto and Kenpachi stare at each other. Starting off the fight, Kenpachi released his spiritual pressure. Naruto only flinched, but it wasn't that noticeable. Kenpachi hummed to himself. Impressive. Kenpachi stated before reaching for Naruto. Naruto, however, jumped back, away from Kenpachi's reach. His smile widened and he knelt down on his left knee. He reached for something in his trench coat around his waist. He took out his Zanpakuto and held it with both hands. He stood and shifted to his stance. Interesting. Kenpachi said aloud. Ninue's eyes were wide and Yachiru was smiling insanely. Kenpachi spread his arms out and left his chest open. Hit me with your best shot, he offered, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. See if you can cut me, I dare ya. Naruto glared at him while he bent his knees, preparing to attack and remembering his Zanpakuto's words. He jumped and headed straight for Kenpachi. A sigh escaped a woman's lips as she entered into the 11th Division's barracks. Her long red hair was tied in a bun, but even then it still stretched down to her calves. She planned on going to her room, taking a bath and sleeping in for the next 48 hours. However, her plans were crashed when she was stopped by two members of the division. Hey, you're back, one of the two said. The woman smiled and waved tiredly at the one who called her, who was a woman in her mid-20s, just like her except the other woman had brown hair. The man next to her, her friend, waved to her as well. Suki, Satoshi, what are you two doing together? The red-haired woman asked. Both looked at each other, blushed and looked away before Suki looked back up at the woman. I'm here to greet you from your year-long patrol of Kurairai town, Suki said, and the woman smiled affectionately. Thanks, the woman said before hugging her friend. And I'm here to tell you about the fight Kenpachi's in right now. The woman smiled widely, forgetting about her fatigue. Who's the idiot this time? She asked, and Suki looked away, but Satoshi smiled. Word is he's of Namikaze and Uzumaki descent, Satoshi answered, and the woman's eyes widened. In the blink of an eye, the woman disappeared and appeared in front of the roofless dojo. She walked in and saw everyone huddled around the ring. Her eyes caught the person in the air, and they widened. Up in the air, ready to strike down her captain, was her son. Kushina could not believe her eyes. She gasped and almost fainted when Naruto brought down his Zanpakuto down on Kenpachi's chest, and blood and dust sprayed into the air. She felt someone's spiritual pressure spike up before disappearing again. She ran through the crowd, pushing back many other members until she was inside the ring. Shock decorated her face, as well as Kenpachi's, when Naruto jumped back and slashed his Zanpakuto in the air, removing Kenpachi's blood from it. The cut itself wasn't significant. Pretty shallow, but it was enough to show Kenpachi that Naruto was serious. A fox-like smile appeared on Naruto's lips as he fell into his fighting stance. Unconcerned by the wound itself, Kenpachi stared at the slash across his chest before smiling and shifting his gaze towards the blonde brat in front of him. Around him and Naruto, the members of the 11th Division remained silent, shocked by the seemingly impossible task of cutting their captain. Each had tried at least once to do this task, and each one failed and received cuts and slashes of their own from their captain. However, this stranger, this child, had managed to draw first blood from their immortal-like, fearless leader. On top of a wall, a Shinigami watched Naruto waiting patiently, holding his Zanpakuto readily for another attack. The little kid intrigued him so much, ever since he first heard about him. A Namikaze was right in his line of sight, and he wanted to do nothing more than to take him under his wing. For this Shinigami, having a Namikaze to follow him blindly would make his plans a lot simpler and easier. Seeing the rate of his growth, he knew Naruto could become the ultimate tool for him to use. All he needed to do was seize the opportunity. A random bystanding Shinigami blinked and looked up at the wall, only to see nothing. He shrugged his shoulders and returned his gaze to the fight. Ikukumadarame, 3rd seed of the 11th Division, watched in awestruck silence as the blonde kid waited for Kenpachi to make the next move. He had yet to make his captain bleed, and here this kid was, slicing open Kenpachi's skin. No matter how superficial the wound was, The feat itself was nevertheless impressive in every sense of the word. The only other person to make Kenpachi bleed was a hot-headed, red-haired woman on their team. Ikaku. Speak of the devil. What the hell's going on? Kushina asked. You have improved, kid, I'll give you that. But that's not going to save you from me, Kenpachi said as he headed for Naruto. TCH, some brat challenged Kenpachi to a fight last year. I don't know the details, but this fight is happening because of what happened last year while you were away, he answered without facing the woman. His eyes were the only thing looking at her, but after that, they moved back to the fight. Kushina just stared at him before also giving her attention to her son and captain. Why are you here, Naruto? Kushina thought desperately as she saw Naruto prepare himself for Kenpachi, who decided to make the next move. Over him like a snake over a mouse, Kenpachi brought out his sword and swung down in a single motion. Naruto blocked it, and found that the weight on his Zanpakuto was more than he thought it'd be. It was almost too much to bear, but then the weight seemed to become lighter, and Naruto found the strength to push back. Unknown to Naruto, his Zanpakuto as spirit pumped his spiritual energy into the blade to help Naruto match the strength of Kenpachi's Zanpakuto. Kenpachi, smirking wickedly, now felt a sensation wash over him that he hasn't felt since his fight with a certain red-haired woman. He felt like this kid would give him a run for his money. Maybe not now, but should he survive the hardships that being a Shinigami came with, he would be a worthy sparring partner, and an even better subordinate. You got a lot of tricks to pull out of that bag of yours, and Namikaze? Kenpachi shouted in glee as Naruto backflipped away as Kenpachi raised his Zanpakuto to bring it down on him again. When Kenpachi's Zanpakuto hit the ground, it shook the ground with tremendous force, making everyone lose their balance. Everyone but Naruto, who landed on all fours with his Zanpakuto in his right hand. He stood up and fell back into his stance. Not in the mood to speak? Kenpachi asked, but Naruto didn't answer. Kushina hoped he would talk, just so she could hear her son talk for the first time since his birth. Adamant to keep his indifferent and powerful appearance, Naruto refrained from saying anything. That's fine with me. Kenpachi ran to Naruto and Naruto rushed past him. Kenpachi tried to cut his head off, but Naruto ducked a second earlier and saved his head from watching his body run away from it. Naruto stopped at the edge of the crowd and continued running in a different direction. He continued this method, running to the edge of the crowd before running in another direction until he picked up speed and it appeared like there were 3 Narutos running around Kenpachi. Kenpachi watched in interest as the 3 Narutos suddenly stopped and then ran towards him. He eyed the one nearest him and struck it with his Zanpakuto. It faded away like a hologram and Kenpachi's eyes narrowed. He turned quickly and grabbed the Naruto in the air by his neck. This one let out a choking sound as he was held in the air by Kenpachi's left hand. The third Naruto was also in midair, but because it was not the original, it faded away when Kenpachi used his Zanpakuto to slice Naruto in half. Interesting tactic, kid. Sneaky, clever? Kenpachi complimented as Naruto struggled to free himself. For the first time since the match started, Kenpachi frowned. In my division, we fight head-on, no tricks, no strategy. Just good, old-fashioned fighting and killing if necessary. Kenpachi dropped Naruto, and he moved away from Kenpachi, standing tall with his chest puffed out, and his eyes as cold and hard as ice. Kenpachi towered over Naruto. If you want to join this division, that's something you gotta remember, Kenpachi said, and his sinister smirk returned as he gripped his Zanpakuto with his right hand. Now stand up, we're not done here. Out of all the things Kenpachi expected Naruto to do, smirking victoriously and sheathing his Zanpakuto was not one of them. Actually, I finished a while ago, Naruto finally said, and Kushina couldn't help but smile at hearing her child's voice. What? Kenpachi asked in a voice that dared Naruto to defy him. You set up the rules, not me, Naruto said defensively. A scratch, I win. No scratch, I lose. Those were my exact words and you agreed. Pointing to the slash Naruto gave Kenpachi on his chest, Naruto smirked. I'm no doctor and don't really want to be one, but I'm going to say that's no boo-boo. That's a grade A cut, much worse than a scratch, Naruto explained, and Kenpachi scoffed. Do you think I care? Fine, you won the bet, but kid, you're way too much fun, Kenpachi said. With Uzumaki and Namikaze's blood flowing through your veins, even now, in your young age, you're a lot of fun. So fine, you're in. Welcome to the 11th division and blah blah blah. Now let me show you how we welcome new members into the division. Before Kenpachi could do anything else, he lifted his left hand up and grabbed a Zanpakuto that almost hit his chest. Naruto raised an eyebrow at seeing some random woman come out of nowhere and stop the beast of a man from attacking him. That's enough, Kushina told Kenpachi as he smirked at her after registering the Zanpakuto. Kushina, what timing? Kenpachi taunted, and she grunted as she freed her Zanpakuto from Kenpachi's grasp. What exactly do you think you're doing? She asked, and Kenpachi chuckled. What's it look like? Messing with the new kid. Kenpachi answered as if it was the most obvious thing in Soul Society. You know damn well who he is. Kenpachi smirked as he enjoyed watching some fight light up in someone's eyes. I had an idea. Kenpachi teased, and Kushina kicked his back. Then why? She asked. I want you to fight me again. Kenpachi said, and Kushina scoffed. That's not gonna happen. She declined, but Kenpachi chuckled. Don't I get a say in this? Naruto asked, and Kushina and Kenpachi stared at him. I mean, no offense lady, but this isn't your fight. Naruto said as he eyed Kushina oddly. Who are you anyway? Naruto asked, and Kushina was hurt by his words even though she expected them. Having died before he had a conscious thought, she knew he probably wouldn't even know she existed as Kushina Uzumaki, former Yuzushiobikure shinobi, once Kanehigakure shinobi, wife of the 4th Hokage and loving, caring mother. He would probably remember her as the no-good mother that abandoned him for a reason that he did not want to think about for fear of crying. Still, in the years she spent in Soul Society, she had thought about what she would say to him should she ever see him again. She practiced and rehearsed it over the time span of 9 years, but now, when it really counted, she had no words to speak to her son. The pain and anguish she felt since being separated from her baby boy had been bubbling up in her stomach since she laid eyes on him. Now it crawled up her throat and refused to move from its position. It didn't even matter to her that she couldn't speak anymore. No words would be able to justify her actions, justify her for leaving her first and only child alone in the cold world of constant fighting and war. Knowing the kind of life a Jinchuriki had, having experienced it herself, she guessed that Naruto had little to no friends and probably no one to look out for him. Tears swelled in her eyes as she imagined all the cold nights he probably spent crying over his unknown heritage, wondering if his parents left because of the beast sealed inside him, or just because of him, or if they were alive or dead, maybe even going so far as to think he was the beast he contained inside. She wasn't sure if he was consciously aware of the beast that was sealed inside him, or that was when he was alive, but either way, he would feel like an outsider in his own village. He looked so much like Minato, but considering how he was acting, he was a perfect blend of Minato's self-control and cleverness, and her impatience, and lust for a good battle. She wiped a tear from her eyes and shook her head. She still had no idea what she was going to say to him, but whatever came out of her mouth, she hoped it would be fitting. I didn't know you were soft, Uzumaki, Kenpachi said, making Naruto growl at him because he thought Kenpachi was talking about him. Before he could retort, however, Kushina kicked Kenpachi in his sternum and drop-kicked him in the face. She landed with a graceful backflip and stood a few feet in front of Naruto. He stared at the back of her head as the momentum her red hair had came to a halt. Why do you keep defending me? Naruto asked in irritation. I'm perfectly fine standing up for myself. I've been doing it my entire life. Naruto shouted. Kushina turned to face Naruto, and Naruto expected to see an angry face but shocked when he saw her tears. He could barely breathe when she dropped her Zanpakuto, fell to her knees and hugged him. His cobalt eyes widened in shock at feeling this woman hug him. She smelled like peaches and her skin was soft. He felt her tighten the hug and also bring him closer to her. His now moist shoulder remained ignored as he processed the situation he was in. Spirit, what's happening? Naruto asked his Zanpakuto-esque spirit, but he received no reply. Inside his mindscape, the blonde man was holding back his tears. While he did fuse with the Kyuubi to become this new entity living in Naruto's Zanpakuto, Minato's memories and emotions have remained. In fact, because of the Kyuubi really only being a mass of chakra with an animalistic brain that retained some intelligence while in its former Jinchuriki, Minato was able to retain control of the brain. The upgraded body and power was all thanks to the Kyuubi, but all the thinking going on was his doing. Once in a while he could feel the anger and frustration the Kyuubi obtained during his lifespan inside the Uzumaki clan's multiple Jinchuriki, but with a little meditation and willpower, he was able to subdue it for another time. He had wandered in Naruto's mind before, to make sure the Kyuubi would not be a problem in the future, but he couldn't help but feel like the Kyuubi would rear its ugly head again. Not soon, but someday. We failed him, Kushina. The man thought, having seen Naruto's memories during his exploration of Naruto's mind. A single tear escaped and slithered down his left cheek. Outside his mindscape, Naruto gently pushed the woman off his so he could see her face. Studying her face, Naruto couldn't help but feel some sort of connection to her. He wasn't sure what it was, whether good or bad, but he knew he had a connection with this woman and was familiar with her. Still, he couldn't help but feel sorry for her. She pulled away from the hug and surprised him again by smiling warmly at him, the kind of smile that mothers usually reserve for their child. Naruto. You're so big. Kushina finally said, and Naruto's eyes narrowed. How do you know my name? Naruto asked her, her smile never wavering. Because I'm your mother. Naruto's eyes widened and stared at Kushina with his mouth agape. Spirit shook his head. Wrong move, Kushina. Expecting Naruto to tear up and hug her back, she was disappointed and shocked when he slumped his head and shoulders forward and began to chuckle. Did I miss something? She thought, a bit hurt by his spontaneous laughter. Naruto wiped a tear and took a step back from the woman. He brushed off her hands and let out a sigh. That was a good one, Naruto said with a smile. He shook his head and crossed his arms over his chest. As far as jokes go, that was a good one. Kushina felt more tears fill her eyes. This isn't a joke, she said, her temper starting to get the better of her. Naruto blinked. Calm down, lady. Joke's over. It's a bit of a touchy subject, but no harm, no foul. Naruto told her, but she shook her head. We should leave, Nini said, and Yuichiro nodded her head slowly. You going to move? Yuichiro asked, and Nini said nothing as they and others stayed and watched Naruto try to calm the crying Kushina. Why don't you believe me? Kushina asked him, and Naruto frowned. Just drop the subject, Naruto said as he tried to turn and walk away but couldn't when Kushina held on to his right arm. Tell me, Kushina shouted in anger. Naruto kept looking away, refusing to meet with her eyes. He held back his tears as his mind wandered to a memory. His fist clenched, and his stomach turning, Naruto felt like lashing out at someone. He never would hurt a woman if he could help it, but Kushina was pushing his buttons like no other. What do you care? Naruto asked, his head leaning forward. His eyes were covered by his bangs, but Kushina knew he was looking at him. Because I'm your mother and— Shut up! Naruto yelled loudly, interrupting Kushina. Everyone contained their breaths in their throats, as an awkward silence shrouded the room. Naruto raised his head and glared at his mother. She gasped at seeing his pupil become a slit and his beautiful cobalt eyes shift to a stormy crimson color. His slit pupils thickened as he bared his teeth and tried to contain his anger. Don't ever joke around like that, Naruto warned her. I have no mother, Naruto said as he looked away. WWH. Even if I had a mother, she abandoned me years ago. That goes double for my father, Naruto told her before snatching his arm away from Kushina's grip. Spirit flinched. Wherever she is, she and my father are having a great life without me, and that's fine with me. Naruto started to walk away. He stopped at the edge of the crowd and waited for them to part. When they shifted out of his way, he walked out of the barracks. Suki saw him walk out of barracks and ran into the dojo. She saw Kushina still on her knees and ran to her side. Are you okay? Suki asked, but Kushina just stood and used Shunpa to leave the dojo. Kenpachi scoffed and walked away. That was troublesome, he stated. Yuichiro blinked before smiling and running after Kenpachi. Wait up, Kenny! Suki watched as everyone else started to leave and decided to go look for Kushina. Not watching where he was going, Naruto bumped into someone and fell back. He rubbed his butt and mumbled incoherent words before looking up and seeing a Shinigami pick up papers he dropped. Watch where you're going, Naruto said as he stood and glared at the Shinigami, taking in his appearance. He appeared as a mild-featured man with brown scholarly hair enhanced by square glasses. He wore the standard Shinigami uniform with a captain's haori. The Shinigami looked up at Naruto and smiled. Naruto felt Spirit's discomfort and paranoia of the man in front of them, but he moved it to the back of his mind. I'm sorry, but I'm sort of in a hurry, he said, and Naruto scoffed. Me too, Naruto said, and the man blinked. What's wrong? He asked, and Naruto shook his head. It's nothing, Naruto told him, but the man smiled. It's good to let some things out, even if you don't know the person. Naruto blinked. What's your name? He asked, and the man closed his eyes, and Naruto saw that his smile was sincere. Sosuke Aizen, captain of the 5th Division in the Godai 13. He answered, and Naruto eyed him again. Nice to meet you. Naruto put up a fake smile and walked past Aizen, not bothering to back at him. I would like some help with this, he said, and Naruto sighed. Sorry, too busy. Naruto replied back and stopped when Aizen appeared in front of him using Shuinpa. I would really appreciate your help. Naruto cocked an eyebrow, but Aizen never stopped smiling. Don't make me use the captain card. Naruto's sweat dropped. Thanks again for helping me, Aizen told Naruto as he stepped into his office in the 5th Division's barracks. Naruto walked behind him with a huge stack of papers that easily overshadowed him. Yeah, well, Naruto said as he dropped the papers on Aizen's desk and panted. 4 pieces of paper, they were pretty heavy. I'll be honest with you, Uzumaki-san, there is another reason I asked for your help. Naruto nodded his head, letting Aizen know he was listening. I wanted to help you, Aizen told him, and Naruto sighed. Look, I appreciate it but I don't need it, Naruto said and bowed. Now if you don't need anything else, pardon my intrusion but why were you so harsh to that woman? Aizen asked and Naruto stared at him oddly. How dash? I could hear from outside the barracks. Aizen informed him and Naruto felt an odd feeling about Aizen. His instincts told him to be careful with this man and Naruto was going to do just that. I just had some issues before I died. He answered Aizen's questions with some hesitance. What happened? Aizen asked. I lived alone. I don't know what happened to my mom or dad and I don't care, Naruto said as he crossed his arms over his chest. No matter how many times Spirit had heard that, he would always feel a pang of remorse hit his heart. I'm sorry to hear that. It must have been a lonely life. Aizen consoled and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Yeah, but not completely, he replied nonchalantly and Aizen raised the eyebrow. So you had some companionship? He asked and Naruto nodded his head. Anyone special? He asked again and Naruto blushed. Well, there was Hinata-chan. Spirit chuckled, having seen that memory. I can see by your blush that you had a significant other. Naruto's blush darkened and spread from his ears to his neck. No. Naruto denied and Aizen blinked, obviously confused. Oh? Then what is it that makes you blush? Naruto shook away his blush. It was a friend I had. She was very nice to me. Naruto smiled fondly at the memory. She means a lot to me. What was she like? Aizen asked. Naruto would have normally found this question suspicious but he was too enthralled by his memory of Hinata. She had short indigo hair and pretty lavender eyes. She was nice, shy and I could tell she'd never leave a friend behind. Naruto smiled goofily. In short, she was the best. Naruto cheered and Aizen's eyes narrowed slightly as he smirked. I see. Not a second later, the door opened and another captain entered the room. Naruto turned and saw that this captain had dark skin and dark brown braids. He had pupilless eyes that were a pale lavender, almost white in comparison to Hinata's in Naruto's opinion, and were behind a pair of goggle-looking glasses. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not interrupting anything, the captain said and Naruto shook his head. I was just leaving, Naruto said as he walked towards the door. Uzumaki-san. Naruto stopped at the threshold on the door. He turned and saw the smile Aizen had on. For some reason, Naruto felt disturbed by it. If you'd like to talk again, you know where my office is. Naruto gulped and nodded his head before leaving. He closed the door behind him and the dark-skinned captain faced Aizen. Was that the Namikaze? Aizen nodded. What was he doing here? I needed his help and he offered his services, Aizen answered and the man cocked an eyebrow. By the way, Tozen, I need your help in something. Tozen nodded his head obediently. What is it, Aizen-sama? He asked and Aizen smirked as he removed his glasses to wipe the lenses with his shirt. I need you to go get someone for me. Naruto sat with his knees in his chest and his arms wrapped around his legs under a white tree not too far away from the hill he fell off of a year ago. Surrounded by the serene white trees and occasional soft breeze, Naruto was able to calm himself before he burst into tears after thinking about his mostly lonely life in Konoha. A couple of tears strayed from his eyes but it wasn't a lot. That wasn't funny. She pushed it too far. What do you think, Spirit? Naruto asked Spirit as he could feel his Zanpakuto pulse and suddenly, in front of him sat Spirit. His blonde hair seemed brighter out in the real world. His black hakama pants and trench coat didn't seem affected by the wind but for some reason, his hair shifted once in a while from the breeze. I think you were a little harsh, to be honest, he answered and Naruto scoffed. Naruto wasn't worried about anyone overhearing them. They'd only be able to hear his voice. As far as everyone was concerned, Naruto was just being a little kid and talking to his imaginary friend. Who asked you anyway? Naruto grumbled and Spirit chuckled. Naruto stared at the ground somberly. Spirit noticed his solemn mood and shifted his body to the left of Naruto. What's on your mind? Spirit asked and Naruto sighed. What if she's really my mom? What should I do? He asked and looked up at Spirit. He only looked away. I don't know. I can't answer that. He then stared into Naruto's cerulean eyes. Only you can truly answer that. What would you do if you found out she really is your mother? Naruto looked at his feet, finding a sudden interest in them. He shook his head after thinking it over. I don't know. Can I really forgive her? Naruto said and looked at Spirit for guidance. Alas, his blue eyes were covered by his eyelids. Thinking passively, Naruto decided to do as his spirit, and closed his eyes, taking deep, even breaths. He evened out his breathing and felt his body relax. Clear your mind. Naruto heard a rough voice say. Let your mind wander. Forget about the trivial things and relax. Naruto did as he was told, feeling his mind wander into the depths of his consciousness. Silence. Nothing was heard except for the soft sounds of leaves rustling from the wind. The day blushed. Red tint painted over the once blue sky. The opposite side of the sky was shaded a beautiful indigo color with the stars decorating its unique and intriguing beauty. Whatever animal resided in the white forest remained silent, also admiring the transition from day to night in silence. The moon had yet to make its appearance, but soon enough it would take center stage once more. Naruto sniffed the air and smelled the pleasant aroma of peaches and nature mixed into his nose. Naruto sighed. You found me, he said as Kushina walked up to him, watching him carefully. It wasn't that easy, you're pretty fast. She told him, and Naruto smirked, his eyes still closed. I get that a lot, Naruto stated. So what do you want? He asked somberly. I just wanted to talk to you, she said as she stood a few feet in front of him. She stared down at him, watching him, taking in his image. He looks so much like Minato, it's scary, she thought, and Naruto popped open his left eye. His cobalt eyes moved up and connected with Kushina's gray-violet eyes. A picture lasts longer, Tibeo, Naruto said, and Kushina's sweat dropped. But he acts like me. And that catchphrase. Kushina smiled softly. He's definitely my kid. So, what's on your mind? Naruto asked as he leaned back and let his back rest on the tree. Kushina sat in the lotus position, facing him. Why don't you believe me? She asked, knowing subtlety wasn't her strongest suit, so she decided not to beat around the bush. Naruto sighed as he rubbed the back of his neck with his right hand. This again. Look, I don't believe you for many reasons. Don't take it personally, I just have the horrible habit of not completely trusting strangers. Naruto told her. But I am your mother, Kushina insisted, and Naruto groaned. Look, Kushina. Right. I find it hard to believe that after 9 years of living on my own, I'd run into my own mother in this place. Whatever this place is, my mind is still having trouble accepting all this new stuff, Naruto said calmly, hoping to drive the insane woman away, but she was a lot more hard-headed than most. How can I prove to you that I'm your mother? Kushina asked, and Naruto hummed to himself after considering her question. What's my name? He asked. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Kushina answered right away. Why does everyone keep saying that? He angrily thought. What's my favorite food? Kushina hesitated. Ramen? Naruto eyed her suspiciously. Lucky guess, he said, and Kushina giggled. For some reason, Naruto liked the sound of Kushina giggling. It gave him a fuzzy feeling, but he decided to investigate it later. What's my favorite flavor? He asked, and watched as Kushina took more time to answer this question. Miso miso. Spirit chanted, and Naruto glared at him. Whose side are you on? Naruto asked, and Spirit smiled and shrugged his shoulders. Not like she can hear me, he retorted, and Naruto scoffed. Lucky for him, Kushina was too busy thinking to notice Naruto talking to the air. I like salt ramen the most, so salt ramen? She answered, a little unsure. Naruto smirked. Nope, miso. Kushina sighed and hung her head in disappointment. He has Minato's taste, she thought. Looks like you got that one wrong. Kushina looked back up and glared. I'm only human, she said, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Ask me another question, she demanded, and Naruto searched his mind for another question. Alright, hold on. He put his left hand over his mouth and hummed. If you really are my mom, you'd know my favorite hobby. Kushina pouted. Well, that's not really fair. It's not like I've known you all my life. All I know is that you're my kid, she informed him, and Naruto scoffed. If I was really your kid, you'd know my favorite hobby. What was your favorite hobby? He asked, and Kushina beamed. Pulling pranks, of course. Naruto stared at her incredulously. She closed her left eye and grabbed her right bicep with her left hand while keeping her right hand up. No one could pull a prank better than I could, she told him with pride, and Naruto couldn't stop the smile from gracing his lips. I bet I could, he challenged, and he saw that she was intrigued by his challenge. He frowned and shook his head. Next question, where was I born? He asked, and Kushina blinked. Kanehigakure, she answered easily. When was I born? He asked again. October the 10th. Day or night? Night. Really? He asked, and she nodded. He shook his head again. He had no solid reason to believe this woman. Well, she did know the answers to most of his questions, and she did seem sincere. How did I get these? He pointed to the 3 whisker marks on his cheeks. Birthmark. She answered, and Naruto could see no reason not to believe this woman. His instincts told him to trust her. She showed no deception in her words or body language, and she acted just like he did. If she was his mother, then her reaction should be predictable by his next question. His heart weakened at the question, and he honestly didn't want to ask because he felt vulnerable for asking, but he knew he had to. Why did you leave me alone? He asked seriously, and Kushina was thrown off by its suddenness. She frowned sadly and looked down. I didn't want to, she said, and felt herself biting her tongue to fight back the tears. If you were really my mom, why did you leave me in Konoha alone? Naruto asked sadly, almost desperate. His needy blue eyes broke Kushina down, and she let a tear fall. I didn't have a choice, she told him, and wiped away the tear. You were in danger, and if it wasn't for your father, all 3 of us would be dead. Naruto's eyes widened. I sacrificed myself. Your father sacrificed himself as well to make sure you lived on, she said as she moved closer and gently held his left cheek. She smiled warmly as more tears accumulated in her eyes. You look so much like him, but you act like me. She reclaimed her hand and clenched it tightly, placing it over her chest. I'm so sorry. Naruto stopped as he watched his mother sob. She looked away. She didn't want her son to see her cry. She felt embarrassed for crying in front of him. He deserved a stronger mom, something she couldn't be at the moment. Her eyes sprang open when she felt Naruto hug her. Tears moistened her left shoulder when he rested his head on her shoulder. I believe you, he said, and Kushina smiled and hugged him back. My baby boy. Naruto chuckled through his tears. That's embarrassing, he said, and Kushina giggled. Get used to it, she ordered, and Naruto shook his head. Eventually, they laughed once more, and after holding each other for a moment longer, they wiped their tears, and Naruto eagerly asked her about her life. As she told him her stories, he kept a goofy smile laced in his mouth that reminded her of Minato. I wish you were here with us, Minato-kun, she thought. After all these years I finally have a mom, Naruto said to himself as he laughed at a joke Kushina told him. After talking throughout the night, Naruto laid his head against Kushina's shoulder and slept soundlessly. Kushina sleepily watched him and smiled. She was glad to have her child back in her arms and to have a chance to be in his life. She had 9 years to make up for, and she wasn't about to let a single moment go to waste. Finally, her eyes became too heavy to keep up, and she allowed sleep to consume